Hello out there. Welcome to the No Shit Cast. I'm your host, Matt Frazier. Thanks for joining us on our journey into the Internet College of Infinite Knowledge. My co-host for this evening's festivities, none other than the Grey Wizard of historical knowledge himself, Mr. Eric D. Smith. How are you tonight, Mr. Smith?
Man, I am doing fan-groovalicious to coin three phrases at once.
I've heard that, yeah. You came in the door very happy tonight. Seemed lighter and less encumbered.
It's true.
Much happier, huh?
Yeah, oh yeah.
So tonight is our follow-up interview with the mighty and mysterious and Mr. Ian Staer sitting in on Skype with us tonight, and we're going to cover some stuff with him and take some deep dives into some subjects we keep missing because of my dumb ass forgetting to plug power into the camera and things like that. So Mr. Ian Staer joining us on Skype. How are you this evening, sir?
Fantastic. It's great as always to be back with y'all, and I'm looking forward to getting back into the weird shit.
Me too. That's the thing. Like, we did all of the serious stuff, and then I was like chomping at the bit to get to the weird shit, and then I screwed it up.
I mean, I think what's cool about you guys is you take the weird shit seriously.
Oh,
you know what I mean? So, like, you're very serious about your weird shit. You know what I mean?
Dude, I brought white papers.
He's got a binder for tonight.
Man.
On
so what you're preparing to embarrass me with my
I'm preparing not to embarrass myself. I've got them here. I read them once, and I'm about halfway through reading them again, but it's just on one subject.
Oh man, yeah.
That's part of the perks of working in a research library.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah. It comes in handy, doesn't it?
It really does.
Some of the most interesting and most eye-opening points of my life have been like pouring through white papers from like the Audio Engineering Society and stuff on just all sorts of stuff like Nyquist sampling theorem and brick wall filtering and how that like affects psychoacoustics and things like that. Just wild stuff when you start to dig into like the deep like how stuff works.
Yeah.
The stuff we take for granted, you know what I mean? Like audio recording, video recording, all that sort of stuff. It's just like white papers, man. Holy crap.
Yeah, they're like
life I'll never get back.
Yeah, they're wormholes. You can go down them and never come out because one begets the other.
Now, have you ever used those kind of techniques in your music, like maybe putting something at 72 beats per minute or using some sort of Fibonacci sequence in the programming of a sound or anything like that?
Yes, absolutely. We're going to jump right into it, I guess.
As usual.
Some of the stuff. So if we can talk about the recent EP I did called Iterated Processes. It's a departure from the usual stuff that I did previously as Staer. And it had a very different, when I first started working on it, there was a bunch of different rules that kind of got put into place to kind of help me stay kind of on target with it. The first of which was I did it all standing up.
Okay. Different energies.
It was, very much different. And I was just talking about this with somebody else earlier this week in a different conversation about just kind of, like how we were. I was talking with a friend of mine named Steve, who's in a band called the Black Queen with Greg Puciato from Dillinger Escape Plan and Josh Eustace, who's from a band called Telephone Tel Aviv, but also played in Nine Inch Nails for a while. And we're talking about like the difference between writing guitar parts, and you can tell like we were mainly talking about just how to kind of write parts that translate well to live performance. Mm-hmm. And he was saying that, one of the things that you can kind of tell is you start to feel differently when you write a guitar part sitting down versus writing a guitar part standing up, and how that informs how your actual musculature starts to get muscle memory and stuff like that, and how you write the part that you're playing. And I was like, dude, that's kind of weird, because when I was working on this EP, because we were both working on stuff at the same time, they were doing the soundtrack for High Level, which is Rob Sheridan's graphic novel, which I think we talked about briefly last time. But Rob Sheridan he has a graphic novel out on DC Vertigo called High Level. Really awesome. Go check it out. But they just did a 41 track score for it that they released, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, and they did like a triple vinyl super limited edition. It's already sold out, so unfortunately you can just go buy it digitally, but you can't get the vinyl anymore. But we were both working on these projects simultaneously, and one of the things that I had noticed was that because I got into working on the project because I had my gear set up for my Pretty Hate Machine rehearsals, which I have to have a couple of keyboards standing up, and it's stuff that I play standing. And then one night I just started kind of noodling around on one of my main whips, the Korg Kronos, and I just started kind of, playing around with it and bashing out ideas. And I just kind of kept going, and I was like, oh, well, you know what? I'm not going to disassemble my rig here. I don't want to move this. I don't want I'm in a groove here. I'm just going to leave it that way. And for the period of several weeks that I worked on it, I always literally walked up to those pieces of gear that were set up, and I would set up a couple more stands, but everything was performed standing up. But as that was the first and most foremost different thing about it, because with the Staer stuff, it's designed for live performance, and I'm kind of surrounded by a rig of synthesizers and whatever. So I'm basically sitting down for a good portion of it, but you can even see in some of the live performances, there's a spot where I'll kick my chair out from behind me and I'm standing because now, and that's when you can tell shit gets real.
Yeah.
Standing up and start to really get into it. But it gives me a chance to kind of keep some gas in the tank. But the rules that were in place for the compositional stage of that recording were to do things in weird numerical repetitions, so things didn't stick to just, okay, this is repeating every 4 bars.
Gotcha.
I would do things like write a piano part that felt right, had an internal rhythm to it, but then I would go, all right, well, that's a loop, but let's, instead of looping that in 8 or 4 or these traditional, metrics, let's repeat it in 11 measures. So if it's just like a 3-note bum 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 kind of thing, what happens when that only repeats after 11 measures? And then I'll have another thing going in the background, just like a weird ambient pad or something like that also does repeat, but maybe that repeats in 13 or something as short as 5 or whatever like that. And trying to stick to, first of all, like odd numbers or primes or things like that, keeps things so that way they never quite lock up with one another except after a really long time period has happened. So it's a way to kind of take something that fundamentally, if I took everything and looped it in 4, it would get boring after 40 seconds.
Sure. Yeah, I see you. Yep.
It's a way to take that stuff, and that's a compositional technique that like folks like Morton Subotnick and even the guys from Tangerine Dream and stuff like that used to use when they were working with like analog sequencers and things like that, is take a 16-step sequencer but have it repeat after 15 notes. You know what I mean? And then take an 8-step sequencer but chop off the last note. So now you've got 15 playing against 7.
Yeah.
When does that ever link back up again? You know what I mean? Like, you've got this thing that's repeating in 15 notes and this thing repeating in 7 notes. It takes a long fucking time for those 2 periods to coincide with one another and hit back on a 1. So you get a lot more time for things to start to develop polyrhythms. And like you were talking about doing like beat frequencies and stuff like that. It's not necessarily a beat frequency, but there are things that develop their own weird internal harmonies because, if it's like a one pattern, bum, 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 and then that's against another melody, they're always, those 2 notes that are happening simultaneously are always 2 different notes. So even if you do it slowly, where it's not happening on where it's happening bum, dum, dum, there's always these interesting harmonic relationships that happen. So definitely I experimented a lot with playing around with like numerical relationships and stuff like that. And also, it doesn't sound it, but there was also a lot of, it's definitely a recorded album as opposed to a performed album, if that makes sense.
Sure.
I went in and I played the parts by hand, of course, but then I would go in and do things like, just to make sure that the articulation of every note, the dynamics of each thing was consistent, or it had a particular timbre to it and it stayed, internally consistent. I did a lot of editing of raw note data.
Sure, like writing the faders up and down, the volume faders and things like that. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. There was a lot of editing going on where
and that can give its own rhythm, Phil.
Yeah, I don't think that it suffered as a result of that. I think that I sometimes am just a lot faster and looser with that sort of thing. And taking the time to really be a lot more intentional,
a lot
more focused about it.
Which I imagine standing probably helps you have that intentional controlling feeling when you're making these compositions.
Yeah, and it also, one of the other things is it kept me taking breaks and coming back.
Okay,
you know what I mean? Because
fresh,
I would feel myself start to get like, a little bit, all right, my feet are starting to hurt. All right, let me hit save. Let me walk away from this. Let me go make dinner or whatever. Let me go, do whatever for a little while. Go, whatever needs to get done around the house, deal with that, and then come back to it. I mean, because it's not like I'm leaving the house. I'm still sort of under quarantine or whatever, but just keeping myself in more productive short bursts and working on it. But I mean, it was a pretty intensive period of activity. I wasn't slacking. Right now, I am fully guilty of slacking. Like I've got some other stuff that's like it's brewing, but I haven't had the literally I have to say, like, having that shit in the middle of my room, where every single time I walk into it, I have to run into it. You know what I mean? I'm bumping into it. It definitely occupies a lot more of the mind share. You know what I mean? It demands, hey, pay attention to me. Hey, buddy, you're going to work on some music today?
Yeah.
Whereas with it all, you can kind of see behind me with this stuff. It's all set up and it's all plugged in and it's all working, but it does fade into the background. And I know that sounds super obnoxious for someone with, what feels like $250,000 worth of gear, to have the ostentatiousness to say, oh yeah, it just sort of fades into the background. Like, I don't mean to make it sound like that, but you sort of just kind of, it becomes part of the regular environment, and you get sort of blinded to it when everything is just in its proper place. But when something is missing and it's out of its proper place, it's an invitation to interact with it again.
I found that with my guitars too. I don't put them away, because if I put them away, I won't touch them. Because I won't take the time to go dig them back out to play them, right? So I leave them on the stands very close to wherever I am, and I pick them up every day because of that. It makes a huge difference,
What about non-standard tuning, like universal tuning, where you're taking A out of 440 and putting it into what they call universal tuning or some alternative tuning?
Yeah. I've read a bunch of that type of stuff, like tuning to 432 instead of 440. But the practical aspect of all that, the fact that I've got all this crap back here, that it's all analog and it has to come up to temp, and a lot of these things don't have adjustable, temperament. You know what I mean? They're all tuned to a certain scale. Like it's all tuned to A440. Although with some of the, I feel like in certain aspects, I could take liberties with things, but I feel like it would just make things more difficult. In terms of mixing later.
Sure.
Because this may be an interesting topic. a lot of people mix by just identifying what frequencies that they're dealing with. You know what I mean? So like, a lot of audio engineers, that we would call golden ears would go, oh, there's too much 1.2 kilohertz in this. Let me pull that down. Or, oh, this is boomy. It's dumpy. There's like too much, 200, whatever, blah, blah. I don't mix that way because I've not developed a really good sense of that. But what I do know from a compositional perspective is what notes I was playing. Mm-hmm. And I know what, I can look at a piece of music or hear a piece of music that I've composed, and I can go, all right, at that moment, I've got 3 or 4 parts that are all holding sustained, let's say, D sharp notes. And I know this part's playing a super low octave D sharp, and this part's playing 1 octave above that, blah, blah. And so I consult my handy dandy chart of notes and frequencies. Mm-hmm. And when I'm in standard 440 tuning, I know that a D sharp is whatever cycles per second. And so when I go through with my equalizers and stuff like that, and I make like, all right, there's too much there. I want to dip that out with a wide Q and, notch it out 12 dB or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's a really easy and solid point of reference for me to go back in. So I feel like if I deviated too much from that, it would screw up my ability to effectively mix the tracks.
I got you. Okay.
Sound like shit. So
yeah. Now, do you normally send your tracks off to be mastered after you mix them?
Yeah. I record everything myself. I mix everything myself. But one of the axioms that most people will tell you is never master your own material. It's just like color grading a film. It's a very different art. It's a lot more clinical. It really, the relationship I have with my mastering engineer is very, very good in that I can send it off to them, and generally speaking, we listen to a lot of the same material, and they are very aware of where I'm coming from. So they can say, all right, this sounds like you're going for this sort of vibe. And I'll say, yup, you totally nailed it. It's sort of like that. And I can send them over some sort of reference tracks. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Sure, yeah.
For the class, when I sent over things like a couple of the cues from the HBO series Watchmen, I sent over some of Ramin Djawadi's cues from Westworld, just so my mastering engineer would have an idea of what the overall volume level of things should be.
Sure.
Should it be brick walled and super loud and pop radio friendly, or should it be like a little bit more?
Yeah.
And those types of engineers have a very specific tool set to deal with that sort of stuff, and they are equipped with all sorts of. There's really fundamentally what I like to call there's like 3 phases of music engineering. There's cutting, there's mixing, and then there's mastering. And so like when you cut, if you're in a studio and you've got like a mixing console, you want to record through a good cutting desk, like a desk that has a lot of character to it, like API or Neve or Trident or something like that, where the preamps have a lot of character, the EQs are very musical, and they impart a certain character to everything. And that shapes the tone of the music as it hits the recording. You know what I mean? The tape, if you will. But then when it comes to mixing, you've already put that, you've already committed all that stuff to tape. Now you just want to massage its relationship to one another without really affecting what was captured on the tape. And so you want to use a more precise thing like a solid state logic desk that has a really powerful, the reason a lot of people like solid state logic is it's a very transparent desk. It has, if I remember correctly, there's like no capacitors anywhere in the audio path, so there's no low pass filtering that occurs. So it's a very open sounding desk, and it's got really, really powerful automation capabilities in it. So if you want to be able to do lots of mix recalls where like every fader comes up to the exact level it was supposed to be. All the EQs are exactly where they were supposed to be, because you want to go through a bunch of iterations, you know what I mean, and go, all right, we're going to try this mix where we duck this one part exactly this many dB down in relation. All right, what does that sound like? Let's listen back. No, we hate it. All right, let's go back to 2 versions ago. When you have a desk that has powerful automation in it, you can just have all those parameters just come up instantly.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, you've got the opportunity to do a bunch of versions of something without having to sit there and micromanage it and have photographs and sheets and stuff for all that. But then when it comes to mastering, you're really only dealing with maybe you'll break it out to stems, like if you're mastering for surround, right? But most of the time, once you're at mastering, you're dealing with a 2-track recording. You just basically need a very focused set of equipment, immaculate sounding speakers that you trust implicitly, really good, very transparent equalization and compression limiters and things like that are just doing little bits of adjustment that just take like for mastering an album is different than mastering a single track, because what you're doing is you're taking the volumes of each of those different songs and you're making them consistent across the entire thing. I know you guys probably know that, but just for the benefit of the listenership, to cast a little bit of light onto that little murky topic. But you know, you're not doing drastic EQ the way you are, like, you know, if you looked at my EQs for the cutting process, you'd be like, what the fuck are you doing? You know what I mean? The mixing process, you know, when you're really just taking massive swaths of spectrum and just being like, you don't need to be there. And once you're in place with everything else, you know, it's just like, you know, framing a shot, you know what I mean? For like a camera shot, like we're dealing with here. Everything outside of the view of the camera doesn't exist.
Right.
I could have like a dead body just over here to my right, and you wouldn't know it. You know what I mean? I could be wearing no pants right now, and you wouldn't know. You know? So, just like when you're mixing a record, if that guitar part, you know, if a guitar is not capable of producing a sound frequency at, like, let's say 50 hertz, why have it there in that multi-track recording? Right. The guitar track itself should be hard, high-passed, well above that, so you don't get any additional mud. Right. And to touch back on the whole beat frequency stuff, you don't want, you know, weird subsonics in the mix where you've got like 30 hertz and 40 hertz rubbing against each other, because you'd be like, why does something sound weird? You know, what sounds weird and dissonant? And then you listen in headphones, and then you just, you know, isolate the bass frequencies, and you're like, oh God, it's awful. Oh God, get it out of there. So then you put in a high pass filter, and all of a sudden everything's like, I can breathe again.
Yeah.
So mastering is definitely its own little art. And Eric Oehler, I hope honestly, I've got reason to doubt that I'm pronouncing his name correctly. I believe it's Eric Oehler, but I heard some other person pronounce it as Eric Ehler. It's Oehler at Submersible Studios out in Madison, Wisconsin. He's done all but one of my releases, and he's done a bunch of mastering for other folks. And we have a great working relationship, and everything I've ever sent him has always come back better.
Great.
And so he's well worth the money I spend on it, but I definitely don't do my own mastering.
Well, now you sometimes involve magic in your music, right?
Yeah. It's a very interesting topic.
Is that a software package?
No.
Or you mean
like magic
practice
with a K?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We went from science and audio engineering straight to metaphysics.
Oh, perfect. I love it. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And it's really funny because I was just watching an episode of Doom Patrol tonight. I'm catching up on that. I'm on episode 13. And have you folks either read or seen Doom Patrol?
Is that with Brendan Fraser?
Yeah,
he's in it. I've just started seeing stuff about that here recently. Yeah,
it's written by a cat named Grant Morrison, who is a fairly. He also wrote The Invisibles. He wrote a couple other things, and he is a fairly prominent chaos magician, and I have. It's weird because as soon as you bring up the M word, I start to kind of like have weird bells that go off.
Okay.
Because I have, I'm very much into science.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I'm very into things that can be proven empirically. I'm very into things that, like things like pandemic mitigation and mask wearing and stuff like that. I like to deal with facts and provable things, not feelings.
Repeatable things, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. However, I also believe greatly in whatever it is that could be termed the ability of the brain to do metaprogramming.
Okay, sure.
And so some people refer to that as magic. Some people refer to certain aspects of that as chaos magic, especially in the way that I experience it, and I guess you could say practice it. And really, there's a bunch of different terms for it. You could call it, the secret, or anything like that. Where basically it's just about, especially chaos magic. But other forms of magic, I suppose. I don't want to speak authoritatively on any of them because I'm definitely not. I'm not a joiner. I'm not a member of anything. I'm not OTO. I am not, a Thelemite. I'm not yet a card-carrying member of the Satanic Temple. Although
you're not a founding member of the Golden Dawn.
Unfortunately, no. I'm a few thousand years too late for that. But I do have. I had a great amount of curiosity about those things, and so, like any good-minded scientific individual, I started to do some experiments.
Sure.
Yeah.
And after I started to kind of get an exploration, basically, I looked at, like I took a wide survey, you know what I mean, of things. And I'm fidgeting with Pez down here.
You can chow down on the Pez if you want.
Yeah, we don't mind.
Well, I am. There was a pregnant pause about 5 minutes ago where I was kind of like, chopping up.
Gonna consider my answer just a moment.
Yeah. Allow me to ruminate upon this topic. But, so I looked into it, and the thing that seemed to really appeal to me is chaos magic, because it's a very pragmatic way of approaching that sort of work, if you will.
So how would chaos magic differ from something like the Gardarian branch of Wicca or apotropasm magic or other types of magic? Like, how would you define chaos magic?
Sure. As soon as you brought up Gardnerian, that's basically, or even like OTO or Thelema, those tend to be more ceremonial.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Ritual based.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
Let's not use that as a differential diagnostic there.
Okay.
Ceremony, where there's a lot of codified.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, like summoning the four gateways and the pinnacle being skyclad using an Athar, like things like that. Yeah.
Like there's a lot of ceremony to do in a lot of Gardnerian Wicca, and even with Thelema and stuff like that. Crowley definitely codified a lot of things into ceremony. You know what I mean? There's Star Ruby, and there's a bunch of things that are in Thelema, and they require a lot of active knowledge of dead languages and things like that. Sure. And it's not the way my brain works. And I as much as I have a bunch of friends that are into it and that really kind of were great people to kind of bang ideas off of, even they were like, you should read Liber Null. You know what I mean? You should read Psychonaut. You should read, and then I started to look at some of the stuff that Robert Anton Wilson was doing as far as like metaprogramming. His book Quantum Psychology was huge for me. and like, also just, looking at Timothy Leary and the 8th Circuit model of consciousness and stuff like that. Those things seemed to be a lot more personally resonant. I never like to say that I'm right and someone else is wrong, because I feel like there's plenty of room for everybody to get a bite of their particular cookie. And I feel like it's just like any sort of personal relationship with what we could call religion or philosophy or whatever like that. There's a lot of underlying tenets which are extremely similar, and it's just about your personal relationship to it. It's like music, you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
The underlying structure is, okay, here's these frequency, ranges. We organize them into, scales or not. You know what I mean? We assign them values for easy reference. We subdivide them into rhythms, and we assign them dynamic levels and things like that, just to make them easier to work with. But the Eastern and Western scales differ. Microtunings and stuff like that, the approach to it differs. So it's all music. You know what I mean? It all works. But the chaos magic thing is less about it's way more. It's kitchen sink. It's working with what you have at the moment to approach the problem that you have in front of you.
And how do you apply it to music when you're creating?
It's a bunch of different ways. Like, so for example, like with some of the, like some of it boils down to sigil work.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And I really have to give a great shout out to a woman named, a person. I actually don't know their pronouns, so I'll just say a person named Laura Tempest Zakroff, who has a bunch of great published books on sigil magic.
Okay.
And
which is, I'm sorry, I don't know what you mean. What is sigil magic? I don't mean to be.
I'm gonna go there.
Oh, okay. Yep.
So, so the idea behind it, and this is also an aspect of chaos magic, is that a lot of times, like, so in ceremonial magic, you'll have certain things that are part of the, I don't mean to sound demeaning or dismissive, but you'll have the props kit.
Okay, gotcha.
You'll have a bowl of salt. You'll have a dagger. You'll have a feather. You'll have all these things that are very strongly symbolic. You'll have a chalice. You'll have these things, a wand, a sword, whatever. And what they're designed to do is to represent certain aspects of things and to help them become
more aligned, focused in their mind. Just like I was saying earlier, when you're in a pentagram at the beginning of a ritual, you would summon the 4 towers, and you would use what's called an athar in certain traditions, which is a sword, but it's called an athar, and it represents fire. And you start with the tower that represents fire, and then you open up these towers and stuff, and then you have a particular ritual, which is you could do this skyclad or not, but skyclad, you're just naked, and it helps you perform magic in certain rituals and stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I can see what you're saying. Yeah, they're like focal points and Hika reservoirs and things of that nature.
So, chaos magic and sigil magic are very interesting to me. And I don't claim to be an expert on the subject. I'm just kind of coming at this with my own particular understanding and interpretation of it. I do recommend that anyone interested definitely check out Grant Morrison's. He's got a very nice talk that's on YouTube, and I forget what con it was at. It was at some convention. I think it was like DisinfoCon or something like that. But I mean, he starts out the speech by screaming into the microphone, just goes woo like that, and like just blows out the mic, and it's completely distorted. And he's holding a beer, and like he's like the dude is like he's lit, right? But like he goes on, and he just talks about he's like, and he's Scottish. That's the other thing. It's huge, absolutely overblown, thick Scottish brogue. And it's like, the thing about chaos magic is it works. You know, like I was never a cool kid, but like I made this vision of myself as what I thought was cool, and like I wrote this character that looked like that, and then the next thing you know, like I've got this famous comic book and I'm famous, and I was dressing like this character and I didn't even realize it. Like, and it just goes into all these things, but it's a really amazing talk, and I highly recommend that if you got an hour to kill, check it out. But it's so like I'm going to come at it from a couple of different angles. And first I'll talk about the sigil aspect of it, just to kind of clarify that and get that out of the way as like as a 101 level primer for the thing. Rather than deal with these props and tools, what the sigil does is, rather than have spells and things like that, or rituals that are designed to kind of go through these readily codified ways of kind of getting from point A to point B.
Archetypical rituals and archetypical castings.
What it does is it cuts to the chase. It helps you identify, well, if you're any good at it, what it causes you to be is very precise. And they say be careful what you call up. And so when you lay your intent out and say, all right, if I'm going to do this, what's the fucking point here? Why am I doing this? What is the purpose of this? Is this, it's, what are you wishing for? Specifically, what is it that you want to do, be better at, be worse at, whatever it is? And then you take that statement and you have to think about it and figure out, like, really at its core, is it, do I want to be rich? Well, maybe that's not the right thing to ask. You know what I mean? Maybe say, I want to be better at my craft so that I make a better living at it. Or something like that, like really distill it down, to where you're giving yourself attainable goals. I mean, and that's a great philosophy just for life in general, is don't give yourself lofty fucking abstract goals like, oh, I want to be famous. Because that really opens up a lot of cans of worms.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Famous for a lot of shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, infamous.
Charles Manson was famous. He was not famous for any good reason.
Right.
So like it causes you to kind of come at, like I said, I hate getting into these kind of topics where I want to say that magic is the answer for everybody's problems.
Sure.
Really figuring your own fucking shit out and getting a righteous plan to get from point A to point B is really the best course of action. And sometimes in order to help you unfuck yourself from your own personal mire, maybe it sometimes helps to have a little bit of structure. And sometimes it may work for people. So the idea is to kind of come up with what it is that you want to get done in an actionable plan. Again, that's one of my big, huge buzzwords, is actionable. You know what I mean? Don't sit here and complain to me about, oh, this sucks, blah, blah, blah. All right, how are you going to change it, and what are you going to propose that is actionable, that you can begin working on right now, that's going to get you from point A, where you're miserable and everything sucks and you hate life, to point B, where stuff is a little bit more manageable. You know what I mean? It's just like walking into a therapy session, which I also highly recommend people do. I'm not anti-scientific. I'm not anti the medical, antibiotics or anything like that. These are all good things that are a result of science.
Yeah,
I know you. I just want to be very clear about that.
Oh yeah, no. I bring this up because I find it interesting one of the reasons why I like your work is because I know that when I have it and I purchase it and I listen to it, I know how much thought has went into it. Like every aspect, from every angle, from magic to mathematics to geometry to music theory. Like, I know you think about these things, and I know you intentionally add them, right? And I think people should know, like, they're deep subjects and relevant to how you express art in yourself.
Sure. So the idea of the sigil is the way I've seen it best explained, and this is part of Tempest's writing, and also books like Psychonaut and Liber Null, and other books on the subject of chaos magic and sigil magic, is basically you take these somewhat complex statements, like let's just say hypothetically we're working with the statement, I would like to be better at my craft so that it is more lucrative, or something like that. You take that and you write it out. And then you take any letters that repeat and you strike those out. And you take all the vowels out. And then you're left with a distillation, which still is representative of the thought, but you know, especially with, you know, things like repeated consonants or whatever like that, it's excess. It's the letter is still there, the form is there. So like if there's 5 L's in it, you strike out 4 of them. And you look at the collection of letters that's left there. And then you get out your Sharpie marker and a piece of paper, and you arrange them into a symbol. And there's other ways to do sigil magic, but like this is one of the ones that really was like, aha.
Yeah.
Me. These other people, like Tempest stuff is more symbolic, you know, where there'll be like, you know, strokes and lines and circles and other stuff like that. And I highly just recommend you read their book on their way to do it. But the fast and dirty way that I've kind of become accustomed to working with is just taking, you know, this 40 or 50 character sentence and distilling it down to, you know, let's say a collection of, you know, 12 or 13 letter forms, and then take those letter forms and make art out of it. So that way the concept is still there, but you've just rearranged it.
And
So
you've made
now-
it personal.
And what you're doing is you're taking it away from being a conscious thought. So what you're doing now is you are removing the objective observation of this sentence, and you're turning it more into an embodiment of the concept. Does it make sense?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
absolutely.
Yep.
So now you've got this embodied concept. And in order to turn it from concept to execution or reality, you have to imbue it with a certain amount of energy. And this is where it gets kind of off script, because there's a lot of people in the chaos magic community that it's sort of predicated on this concept of a state called gnosis, Gnosis.
Yeah, it's a Greek word that means wisdom, like the Gnostic Gospels.
Where you are in a state of basically disconnection with anything but this. You have, it's basically hyper focus.
Yeah. The
In-
Greeks
for
would
lack
call
of
it being in ecstasy, which for them meant outside of the physical body, and then in a ecstasy sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of people attempt to achieve this state through use of chemicals.
Sure.
I'm sober, you know what I mean? So, I mean, I don't drink anything stronger than, you know, some ginger beer or some black coffee. So that doesn't really work for me. But what does work
Is
losing myself into a, you know, a different elevated brain state, a flow state
Flow. Yeah, I've heard
of
that.
creating music.
Mm-hmm.
Just like I may also sometimes lose myself in a flow state when I rock climb.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I started to think, all right, I can put these, you know, like I think you can start to see the dots are being slowly connected. This is like a cyberpunk novel. The disparate plot elements are starting to slowly drift and coalesce. So I started thinking to myself, I can probably kind of make these things work together. And so when I really pushed towards creating a live experience with the space music stuff when I was composing the Garden of Forking Paths. That's my first real. That was my first real sincere effort at creating something long form. That sucker's 20 minutes long, and that was my put up or shut up moment where it's like, all right, I need to be able to do this, a la Tangerine Dream. And that was Tangerine Dream's Ricochet Part 1 and Part 2. I mean, that's a song that takes up 2 whole sides of an album. You know what I mean? That's like Thick as a Brick by Jethro Tull, where it's one song that takes up, both sides of an album. It was very inspirational to me because I heard it on a radio show and I was like, Christ, this is from like 1978 and this still holds up. This is amazing. This is vital. It's really good. I should really kind of strive to be able to hold a compositional idea together for long enough that it can last that long, but with enough variety and evolution that it doesn't become repetitive after a minute and a half.
Yeah.
So in the compositional process of that, kind of just having my head down and just, having my stuff arranged around me in a way that I was never, again, this gets back to the sitting versus standing thing. It's very much a sit down piece because I really kind of have to be in front of the stuff that I'm doing. And it's very sequencer driven because, again, having it be sequencer driven like that, I can kind of just let the sequence go and listen to it and modify the parameters of the sound while I'm not physically playing very much, but I am playing things, I'm playing held drone notes and held chords and things like that. But a lot of the evolution of the piece happens through, subtle manipulation of filters and things like that. And it's definitely done. It's a philosophy that I sort of picked up from reading interviews with Alessandro Cortini, who is a musician of whom I am very enamored. He plays live synthesizers with 9 Inch Nails, but I'll be honest, like there are definitely points where I consider myself more a fan of his solo output as a strong composer of very compelling instrumental music than I do consider myself a fan of 9 Inch Nails. And it's saying something because I'm a really big fan of 9 Inch Nails.
Yeah.
But what he manages to do, he's not a player. He even considers himself to be, when you hear him talk in interviews, he's not very much. I mean, he is a player. He's a guitar player, and he can play instruments. But a lot of his composition is more about dynamically altering the timbre or the tone of a sound, and having it be an evolutionary thing. So when he plays a composition on the Buchla music easel, it's something where there is a 5-step sequence that goes and he's playing some stuff, against it, or he's doing compositions with, an MC303 and, a very concise collection of effects pedals and things like that. So I started to kind of go, all right, there's a few kernels of worth in this, in terms of let's look at this less in terms of how many fucking notes can I play, and more in terms of how many different states of sound can I ring this one motif through over the course of, let's say, 20 minutes and have it not be boring.
Mm-hmm. Something that maybe Phillip Glass might try to do.
Again, and that's another influence that's right here on my sleeve. I mean, I even a lot of my bios, I say that, my influences are Phillip Glass, Alessandro Cortini, John Murphy, the guy who did like the scores for Sunshine, 28 Days Later, stuff like that. It's very obvious.
How do you go back and listen? How do you feel about John Cage and his indeterminate music, where he was using I Ching, which is a divinatory form? You ever go that route?
Yeah. I mean, there's like I haven't played around with too much of it, but I'm definitely aware of those strategies. I mean, you may be aware of like the oblique strategies cards.
Is that John Cage?
No.
Okay. I'm not aware of that. No.
It's Eno.
Oh, okay. Okay.
He made up a box of cards that when one is confronted, it's almost like a Magic 8-Ball, but for music production.
Oh, wow.
Where, like if you end up jammed up, you just basically shuffle the cards and pull one.
Oh, that's
and
cool.
It may say something like, mute all the drums, or replace all traditional, but it's oblique. You know what I mean? It's like replace all traditional percussion.
Okay.
Or, pick, grab fader number 4 and reduce it by 6 dB. Just like, it's when you're so jammed up for options that you're just like, I will take any suggestion right now. And if you hold yourself to actually doing what it suggests, it's a pretty interesting,
Yeah, that is.
It's an interesting exercise in letting go and letting something else dictate the path of where it goes.
I love his on land composition.
I don't think I'm as familiar with that. Like I know Apollo, like that was a big one for me. And a lot of the work that he did with Bowie. Also, I'm a lot more familiar with that, and even some of the stuff he did as far as programming the DX7, which is it's an obnoxiously impenetrable synthesizer to try to program. It's got one data slider and 2 digits of readout. It's
oh my.
hot trash.
Menu.
Yeah.
Menu.
So, let me guide myself back to the tracks. That way we can maybe some people can leave with a good understanding of what's going on. So in that compositional process, I found myself able to sort of get the hell out of my head, and be more navigating by feel as opposed to living, with the recent, remember I said that this is the recent EP I did was a much more recorded piece than a performed piece. Mm-hmm. This is where we're talking about a delta between those two schools of thought. Because the Staer stuff is definitely a lot more felt, even the live performance. It's 100% live. And the durations of every note that I play changes every time I play it. It's definitely felt, and it has to do with the fact that all the sounds are coming from the modular synthesizer, and those are functions of those weird, 15 against 7 against 3, whatever, or they may not even have any particular anchor in a timeline. It may not even be running on a clock or a timeline at all. It's literally just things that are, I dialed this knob until it sounded good. I don't even know what beat per minute it's playing at, and I don't particularly care to find out. Right. I'm not trying to sync it to a drum machine. There are few, if any, drums to work as a rhythmic anchor. For a lot of the more drifty things, and so it enables me. I may even play at different tempos. It all sort of lands at around the same sort of tempo, but they're not precise. If you listen to 2 recordings, of 2 different nights, they're not going to lay right over top of one another the way they would with, let's say, our performances of Hate Machine. You know what I mean? Yeah. Where we're coming off of backing tracks and everything's laid into a master. I'll hit start and stop on the songs, but once the songs are rolling, they're on a timeline. You know what I mean?
Right.
So when I'm in that flow state of just sort of kind of not really in here, you know what I mean? I am in here, but I'm also out here and just listening and interacting and becoming a sort of a passive participant in what's going on with the sound around me. I said to myself, all right, that's a pretty good time to sort of maybe allow that energy to build up towards this end. But while traditional chaos sigil magic requires things like, all right, now you have to destroy the sigil in order to break it and release that energy out into the world, I thought, all right, well, what if I do this? What if I do this in a different way? And so, for the first performance of Garden of Forking Paths, because I'm extra, super extra, I just happened to have a 5-watt RGB graphics capable laser.
Nice.
Okay.
And I'm a variant licensed laser safety officer,
Right.
laser operator. And I happen to have access to, a $10,000 lighting console to connect to it, to program it. And I just happened to have all this equipment. So I figured, I have an idea. I can take this abstract symbol of this sigil that corresponds to this particular intention for this work, and I can destroy it a different way by setting up things in the lighting programming, basically the laser programming, to, over the course of the 20-minute timeline of the performance of the piece, there's a defined, all right, this is going to last 20 minutes, and I'll take out my phone and I will start a stopwatch, and I'll just be like, all right, 20 minutes counting down now. And then I'll hit the first note, and then I know I've got X amount of minutes to get from point A to point B. And so if I look down and I go, shit, man, I'm coming up on 10 minutes, I have to move into the next movement of this, I could just I gently jog myself out and just, I'm still aware of, what the hell is going on, because I gotta, keep things moving on it, But so what I did is I programmed in some degradation.
Okay.
The technology that's implemented into the laser that I use allows me to pack on and stack on different deformations and modulations of the line patterns that are being drawn. And so I came up with the design of the sigil itself, and it was really cool because even just when designing it, you basically have to break it down to its geometric components and slap them in multiple layers, just like if you were building an image in Photoshop or something like that. And I was able to, this particular laser is capable of doing 6 different individual geometric layers simultaneously. It can do, anything from simple geometric shapes like triangles, straight lines, or signs, or octagons, or whatever. But it can also do complex geometrical shapes like, a Pac-Man, or a radiological hazard symbol, or, whatever, like it can do very complex vector-based drawings. But it can do 6 of those at a time. And so you could have a red triangle that's this big, that's moving at 6 RPM counterclockwise, and then you can overlay a blue square moving at 4 RPM clockwise, and then you can have 6 of those sprites, if you will. It's a 30K scanner, so it's moving at 30,000 cycles per second.
Wow.
Which makes it a very fast scanner, which is why I say a graphics capable laser.
Yeah.
So it's one single point. That's the thing to keep in mind about this stuff, which is fascinating to me. It's one single fucking point of light that's moving at 30,000 cycles per second, and it's able to modulate its color quickly enough that it appears as if there are 6 different individual elements still visually discernible. So that way it's drawing this red triangle moving at 6 cycles per second. Yeah. and this blue square that's moving this direction at 4 revolutions per minute. Like,
Wow.
It's mind-blowing. It's super fun. I mean, I was just down at the company today, dropping off something that I drove down to Maryland. It's a company called X Laser out of Laurel, Maryland. And they're fantastic people. They're great friends of mine. They make great equipment. You know, they make stuff that's out with, like, you know, Roger Waters, you know, for the wall and stuff like that, on through stuff that's being put into major theme parks and attractions and stuff like that. But they also make, you know, fairly affordable, you know, I mean, they're not super inexpensive. I mean, the one I'm using is probably around like a $4,000 laser, but because I'm a representative for the company, I happened to have it. And
you know, demo unit.
I'm going to play with it, you know?
Yeah. That's kind of your job.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great, you know, it's a great way to kind of create proofs of concept and be able to talk about it. So using the software control and the hardware, I had this ability to create this dynamically animated thing that didn't even really look like a sigil, because it was made of all these elements that were rotating and spinning in X, Y, and Z space. So fundamentally, to a casual observer, of which there were, you know, 75 in the room or whatever, this is a live performance. So I feel like it becomes a collective thing where the audience is also concentrating on this thing, but they also are unaware of the conscious
intent behind it
thing.
Yeah.
So they are not imposing anything but their own energy onto it. And hopefully, if I'm crafting the energy from the music, all I'm doing is just creating this contemplative and overwhelmingly positive space around this thing. And so as the performance is going on, it's sort of, you could say that it's sort of like a public, I really hate to use the word ritual because it has so many connotations that have sort of become somewhat negative, but you know, it's you know, it's like going to church and seeing someone give you know, say a communion mass or something like that, you know, if you're Catholic or whatever, or to, you know, be, you know, at a synagogue and see, you know, like, you know, hear a cantor, you know, doing a recitation or something like that from Torah. It's, you know, it's regardless of your involvement with it, it can be a very powerful and beautiful thing, you know, to experience. So why not involve the audience in it, you know?
Right.
So that's kind of where it came from. I had this symbolic representation of what it was that I felt was the aim of the work, and was able to, on a timeline, dissolve it and have it devolve into nothingness, basically devolve into just absolutely scrambled non-existence. And then at the conclusion of the performance, you know, as a laser operator, I have to, it is complicated to do, because like, I also, one of the reasons that I did that performance, and one of the reasons I do my performances facing away from the audience, is so I can see the laser. And I'm actually cheated. Like I'm actually, so I can see the laser itself and I can see where it's hitting. So I have full visibility because I'm kind of sideways. I'm not aiming. I'm not just looking out at the audience. I'm sideways. So that way I can look this way and I can see the laser. I can look this way and I can see where it's hitting. So at no point am I divorced from either of those things. So I can see if the beam is hitting what it's supposed to be hitting. And I can also make sure that there's no, you know, like when I've set up the equipment, there is no physical way that anyone can walk into the beam path, because it's got to be at a certain height. Yeah. And there's all these rules. It's got to be at least, you know, 3 meters above anywhere where anybody in the audience can stand or otherwise get in the beam path. So when I rig it, it's at that height. And then when I zone it, it can never, when you zone a laser, basically it sets operational parameters within the laser itself, that it literally, once it goes back, like I'll take a measuring tape, you know, to 10 feet on the wall that it's striking, mark or just put a piece of gaff tape or something like that and say, all right, that's 10 feet. And then I have a test pattern that I shoot against the wall. And the way it works is that once it hits that boundary, the laser just goes dark. And so it's basically got like an internal mask. And so it never goes below that. So it can't even accidentally sweep down and hit anything that it's not supposed to hit. But God forbid, you know what I mean, something happens and someone knocks it, I have to keep an emergency stop next to me the whole time.
Yeah.
So I've got a little dongle with my quote unquote big red button literally sitting right there on my synthesizer. That anything happens, I just go whap and I hit it, and it immediately kills the power, kills the output to the diodes, and everything goes dark. I'll still keep playing, but the laser is fucking off. You know what I mean? And it will not go back on until I've turned a key, hit a button, and then pulled the plunger out. It's a full mechanical interlock. Like, I mean, it's a 5-watt laser. You can't fuck around with it. You know, like I said, I'm a variance operator. You have to do this stuff by the book. So, so that was that performance, and it went well, and it was super safe, and you know, everything was by the book. But it was way too much to manage. You know, I had to really kind of be very hyper aware of everything, because in order to do it myself as the laser operator, you know, I had this going on here. I had the lighting console off to the side. So I was looking at that, and I had the keyboards here and that, and my mixing desk here. And I mean, thank fucking God I have ADD.
It's like trying to land a space shuttle.
You're in charge of people's safety and their entertainment.
Yeah. But I mean, I've done that before in terms of like, I've done DJ gigs like at some anime cons where I was called in to do lighting production, but I also brought my DJ gear, and I'm literally sitting there with 2 Technics turntables with a copy of Serato, which is a DJ software, laptop up in front of me, and off as my sidecar, I've got a High-End Systems Whole Hog 3 running the lights for the room at the same exact time. So like, I'm literally mixing a track, you know, doing my transitions and making sure that, you know, the 2 songs get blended together. But for the intervening 7 minutes, now as the songs are, you know, like having dynamic portions of them, I'm riding submasters and hitting flash buttons and popping off strings. So like, I'm no stranger to multitasking. And when it's really cool, because when, like, you know, granted, if my philosophy of DJing is that if people are paying attention to what you're doing on stage, you're doing a shitty job.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
You know, people shouldn't be, you know, and like, that's like, it's a very old school kind of mentality to where, you know, at some point DJing turned into this thing that you do on stage. Yeah. And the entire crowd is aimed at you, and there's a big video screen behind you, and there's all these lights and all this shit, and you're, you know, dead mouse or whatever. Not to take anything away from you, because I mean, part of that, you know, like the lighting console company that I represent, I mean, we did Eric Prid's, lighting production and the crazy immersive media servers and stuff like that we do is Avalite's Titan and Avalite's AI media servers that do this absolutely fantastic immersive 3D media management and pixel mapping and stuff. But you know, I came from the early 90s dirty raver kid school of DJing, where the DJ was kind of off in a corner in a booth somewhere, and the crowd is just divorced from that, and they're just getting down, and they're in a circle, they're facing each other, and they're just dancing, and the music is something that's just sort of happening.
Yeah.
You're there, but you know, the DJ is not the focal point of what's going on. So that's why I like to just kind of, you know, inundate the audience with, you know, aim all the lights out that way. You know what I mean? Don't need too much light on me. I don't want a spotlight on me, nothing like that. Everything just be audience abuse all the time. You know what I mean? Create an atmosphere out there. But I would catch a couple of people that were, you know, there and into what I was doing, especially because, you know, I still use vinyl, and that's for some people, that's kind of a novelty. You know what I mean? Even though I am using software, I'm using vinyl to control it. But, you know, there'd be the people with their arms up on the barricade looking up, And I'd be, I'd look down and be like, hey, what's going on? Obviously make eye contact, acknowledge people. And then when you realize that they realized, they put two and two together and they saw when I turn off to the left and here I am banging on this thing. They're like, holy shit, are you running the lights too? Yeah, I am,
So buy a t-shirt, please.
Yeah. But
it's like a
you
one-arm
can
wallpaper hanger.
kind of do that when you're playing other people's music. It's a lot harder to concentrate on that when you're playing your own.
Right, sure.
And, keep track of, things like making sure that, all right, out of the corner of my eye, look at the laser, make sure, okay, it's still up there. It hasn't moved. It's not, like, all right, good. We're still good there. Turn there, and just, kind of look around and, just make sure everything's still good. And all right, everything, it kind of keeps you from being completely lost in the thing.
Sure. Yeah.
So it was a great proof of concept. And it's something I only ever did once.
So the point of this is that I want to make sure I'm following you here, right? When the sigil devolves as the composition is moving to its finale, and then so is that kind of like a musical spell? Because you said there's an intention behind this. Okay, yeah.
Spell songs.
Spell songs.
And as it is destroyed, you are breaking it and casting it out into the world.
Yep. Well,
so just like with some of the ceremonial magics, a big touch point with me is Thelema, less so Gardnerian Wicca. So like, Star Ruby, where, it's a lot of lunging motions and you're casting the demons out of the circle and you're cleansing the space and you're clearing everything bad out and you're creating a clean environment in which for you to do subsequent work or whatever like that.
Now, do you bring the audience into this? Do they understand the mechanics of what's happening and the intention behind the sigil? So does the audience get to participate with you in that way? I think that would be really neat. Like, it takes it takes the level of that kind of up a whole nother level of how the audience is participating with the performer in that case.
That is a really interesting question, and that's one of the other reasons I only ever did it once.
Okay.
Because that certainly does open up a can of worms in terms of consent.
Okay.
If you think about, okay, so we were talking before the camera was rolling about the fact that, like, you've maybe picked up a couple of cool new little tidbits. Check out the band Coil. They are another set of artists who were definitely interested in chaos magic, and they definitely involved it into their performances. And I feel like at a certain level, people kind of, if you were there and you were a fan of the band, you can't not have known what you were getting into.
Okay.
But I'm sure there were plenty of people who were casual attendees that maybe weren't aware. Maybe it was their first time, or maybe they were guests of someone who brought them to the show or whatever. And maybe they weren't aware, that, some of this stuff had, magical intent behind it, or was ritualistic or whatever like that. I mean, then there's plenty of like ritual ambient and stuff like that. Ritual ambient is, it's a whole subgenre. There's bands like Herbst 9 and stuff like that are, literally classified as ritual dark ambient. Other bands I'm into, like Current 93, even their name should be a big ding, 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 ding. Like if you're into any sort of mystical like type stuff, like, oh, Current 93, that's clearly like a Thelemic reference. But a lot of people just go, oh, this is interesting music. I find it, for whatever reason. So they may be approaching it from a textbook ignorant standpoint where they just don't know, that this is, an aspect of the music. So I felt some type of way about what I was doing, from a consent standpoint, in involving other people in that process, even though it's definitely not malicious in any way. I had to kind of think about it and go, you better think about this.
Yeah.
So I kind of shelved the idea. I think it has a great amount of potential, but it had its drawbacks. Again, first of all, just doing it with the laser was an amazing way of doing it. You know what I mean? And it was absolutely, I can guarantee you no one else has done it like that. You know what I mean? No one else has done a show like that where that's what that thing was doing.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I hit on a really,
Yeah.
And it definitely worked. I mean, I have a very do no harm, peaceful intentions kind of reasoning for doing stuff like this. Things like, more like, hey, can people just be calm? You know what I mean? Can people just be able to find their own internal level of happiness or respite? You know what I mean? Stuff like that. Like, I'm not asking, oh, I want everyone to be bent to my will and then go out and be like, because I mean, like, that's some egotistical shit, and that just is, and that's not what this is about.
Do my bidding.
But it's more it's designed to kind of be a complement to the spirit of the material, which is to find a way to kind of disconnect from the chaos and the hubbub and the stress and find some way to kind of lose yourself in one way or another in a non-representational piece of music.
Now, I thought, I could be wrong, but because it was in the liner notes when albums used to have liner notes, right, and stuff. But I thought Tool, whether they were serious about it or they were just taking the piss, so to speak, by putting this stuff in there. But I think that they were into kind of this same sort of symbolic. Danny Carey, yeah.
Danny Carey definitely is. If you like, he's
you look at his drum heads and stuff; they all have symbology on it. And there's that really, really amazing live performance of his, just drum footage of him playing. Man, I've probably listened to that at full volume at least 100 times now, and just been mesmerized by it.
So, a gentleman of whom I have become acquainted is a guy named Peter Grenader, and he designed the toolbox synthesizer that's behind Danny, that big modular system that he has.
Yep.
And he designed that for Danny. He's friends with Danny, and friends of mine. I'm not going to give full names because I don't want to dime them out or make them feel weird and embarrassed. But my friend Adam actually got a gig going out, and because Peter couldn't go out and do it, Adam went out and actually readjusted the patch on the toolbox for Danny. And it was really cool, because like Adam's a buddy of mine. Adam's also into magic and stuff like that. And so we kind of vibe on a bunch of levels like that. And but he actually went out and did some of the touch-up programming on Danny's synth, and the synth itself was built by a dude that I've. It's pretty cool, man. Like that like the synth community is small enough that I have begun interacting with these cats, and I've got some of Peter's modules actually over in my little Blinky box back there. He stopped making modules for a while. He used to do stuff called Plan B. And then now he does EAR, electroacoustic research. But his Plan B modules, there's two of them that Kevin Key from Skinny Puppy did reissues of back in, I guess, like 2012. And when I was touring with Atari Teenage Riot, we were playing the Coachella Festival, and we did 2 subsequent weekends at Coachella And in the intervening week, we basically camped out at this hotel, which incidentally is the hotel that has a restaurant downstairs, which is a diner where they shot the movie Swingers. Weird shit. I mean, like LA, and it's right around the corner from like the LA Scientology temple and stuff like that. And, I ended up, our sound guy is friends with Kevin Key from Skinny Puppy. And he went over there one day, and I was like, hey, can you tell Kevin that I'd be interested in buying some of his modules? And he's like, oh, we're going to meet together for lunch tomorrow. And so next thing you know, the next day, I'm out at lunch getting sushi with fucking Kevin Key from Skinny Puppy.
Nice.
And I'm literally sitting across the table from him. And it's funny as shit because at the time I didn't have a beard and I was clean shaven. And it's weird. We kind of look alike. We're both fairly tall. I've got a sort of pointy nose. He's got a sort of pointy nose. And, I keep my hair pulled back, and he's got really long dreads, but he wears a bandana, and I'm always wearing either like a bandana or a head covering or something like that. It was just super fucking weird. But, I was like, yo, I'd really like to get those modules that you're making because I just, first of all, I can get them directly from you, get cash on the barrel, and make sure that you're getting a full cut of what you're doing. But I also think it's cool that you're helping Peter, kind of rejuvenate his business because he was cutting Peter in on a portion of the sales. Help him get back, financially on his feet as a business. And so that next night, how did that work out? What was the timing on that? The day after that was the day that we ended up at Charlie Clouser's house. Charlie from Nine Inch Nails, who also does the score for Saw movies and did American Horror Story and a couple other things like that. And so we ended up going to dinner with Charlie at this awesome Italian restaurant in Malibu. But the day after was the show where we played in LA at the Echo, and it was fucking nuts because like I'm backstage, I go to an ATM, I walk off site after sound check, I go to an ATM, I take like $500 out in cash, and I'm walking through Los Angeles with $500 in my pocket, and I walk backstage. And I walk into Kevin's area where he was set up because he was guest performing with our opening act that night. And, weed is legal in California and had been still at the time. And, it's no secret that Kevin loves to hang with the green guy, right? So I walk into his dressing room, and it's just like, it looks like a fucking drug deal is going down. It's like just clouds of ganj, me with 5 bills in my hand, and he hands me, a bag. But, the twist ending is that, like, in this bag is 2 cardboard boxes with these little Eurorack, modules. And Charlie was backstage that day too, because Charlie came to the show because he's friends with the guys from Atari Teenage Riot because they toured together when Atari Teenage Riot opened up for Nine Inch Nails back in the late 90s, early 2000s on the Fragility tour. And I was like a kid in a candy store showing Charlie these modules. I'm like, oh man, check this out. It's like the old Plan B Model 15, but Kevin did a cool new faceplate and he changed the polarity of the ramp waves, and now it's a downward ramp as opposed to an upward ramp. So when you use it as an LFO, it goes do 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 instead of whoop whoop whoop. And like we just geeked out. Like it was a great moment. But so I was a big fan of what Peter was doing at the time as a result of that. But then we ran into each other because Peter just did a record with Steve Roach and a couple other ambient artists, and we've just gotten to know one another, and it's super fucking cool. But to reel it back in and land the plane, seeing that video of Danny playing Numa, you know what I mean? Realizing that, a lot of that stuff, and even other songs that Tool have done where they're based around like Fibonacci numbers and things like that.
Chromosome numbers, telomeres.
Yeah.
I fully believe that, I mean, because that's really Danny's band. You know what I mean? The Tool is Danny Carey's band. Maynard shows up after the fact. I mean, everybody always associates singers, but that's from what I understand. I can't presume to speak on his behalf, and I don't want to be taken that way. But from what I understand, I mean, that's one of the reasons that, like, in Tool, Maynard stays upstage. You know, you got Justin and Adam downstage, and then Danny,
Right.
you know, with spotlights on him. But Maynard, like, you know, he's just off in a corner without any lights on him, and he faces upstage and doesn't really, you know, like, he's the voice of the band, but he's not writing the material. He comes in after the material is written, and he writes the lyrics and performs the vocals.
Yep. That's the way I
Whereas,
understood
like,
it too. They write the music first, and then he puts lyrics to it. But the music is done ahead of time.
Whereas Pussifer is Maynard's band.
It's Maynard's band, yeah.
Yeah, that's him 100%. You know, and then, or like something like A Perfect Circle is Billy Howardell's band.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's Billy's band. Billy writes the songs, Maynard sings on them, and then you got dudes like Josh Freese or Pazlan Shantine, you know, that, like, you know, play along with the compositions and stuff, but it's not, you know, the Maynard James Keenan show the way that, like, Pussifer is. So I'm shaking the magic 8 ball and going, outlook pretty good. That, you know, given the fact that Danny has a gigantic, you know, 7-pointed star behind him,
Right.
and unicursal hexagrams and all that kind of stuff, like, it's like, dude, I cannot make this any more obvious. You know, like, there's all these, like, mystical references that aren't even references; they're blatant.
Well, I don't know what magic would sound like, but I would venture a guess it's that. I mean, I made the comment one time that listening to Tool makes me believe that communicating with aliens is possible. Like, the stuff they do is so fresh and different, and it's really interesting stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that has me really salty about the fact that, like, touring is right now, because they were on the road in the middle of all that.
Yes, they were. Yeah, they got cut off.
My friend is their dimmer tech. You know what I mean? Her job literally every night is to sit over at stage right and just watch all the gear and make sure that if anything weird happens, she's on headset and she'll send reset commands and whatever like that. But
I was going to ask what that was.
Yeah.
Dimmer tech. I'm like, that's not what I'm thinking. Yeah, it can't be that. It's going to be something else.
Well, you know, like, in the world of production lighting, you've got, you know, basically, you got front of house, where you've got your front of house audio console and you got your lighting desk. Typically, lighting director sits out there and the front of house audio engineer sits out there. Sometimes you'll have a separate lighting person that's a spot caller, unless like you're like me and you have to do double duty and you're running lights and you're calling spots on headset. Which is basically, you're on an intercom with between 4 to 8, sometimes more, spotlight operators that are up in the rigging,
Right.
or hanging on a truss or something like that, which I have done. I've done that job. That's one of the things that got me into climbing, was like, all right, if I'm going to be a spot operator, one of the best shows I ever got to run spot on was Soundgarden, you know, hanging 40 feet above it. And like my spot was Kim Thale, you know what I mean? So, like, I was the person getting called for every time he would play guitar. And I was like, all right, cool, great. I'm spot, you know, spot number 7 or whatever. And I'm on Kim Thale all night. I could do worse.
Yeah.
You know, Chris Cornell is right underneath me, God rest his soul, you know, and like, I enjoyed the hell out of that gig. You know what I mean? It was great. I mean, we were all dying from diesel fumes because it was all wafting up from the diesel generator, because it's now a show. It was all wafting up the stage roof and coming straight up to where we were. And we actually had to have them set up like some sort of baffle, because we're like, hey, you know, we're not trying to be complainers up here, but like, we're all about to barf on your talent down there.
You might want to
generator. You do something about that.
You guys either need a tarp or a baffle.
So then on the stage, you've got Guitar World, which is where the guitar tech's set up, and they've got boats full of different guitars that are tuned to different tunings or whatever for different songs, and each one of those guitars has a wireless pack on it, and they swap them out and whatever. You've got Monitor World, which is an audio desk that mixes the sound that the people on stage hear.
Right.
So there's speakers aimed at them, or they're wearing headphones that allow them to hear their own custom version of what's going on, which also, that'll include things like click track or guide tracks, you know what I mean? So like, if it's a song that starts out with, you know, a vocalist doing a solo, they may get a count in 1, 2, 3, 4, like that in their ears, so they know what notes they've got to come in on.
I like it.
So
yeah.
they're not just starting cold. It's actually got a guide tone.
Or out of key. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
No, that's interesting.
Yeah, and
I wondered how they did that.
Yeah.
And I just found out this week that people bootleg those feeds, which is crazy because it's wireless, it's RF.
Yeah.
Okay.
There is a very small group of people that will sneak into venues and they will have radio receivers.
And they listen to you guys.
Yeah, they'll listen to the IEM feed, which is also, I mean, that's some of the cleanest way to get the music. You know, like you get someone who's like a lead singer that wants a little bit of everything in their ears. Mm-hmm. You got drums in there, you got the guitar, keyboards, vocal, everything's coming into their ears. Right. So now you've got a clean recording of it without, you know, much distortion or anything like that because there's someone actually mixing it.
That makes sense.
It's getting beamed directly to your little receiver connected to your recorder. But
so if you were following the Dead today, you wouldn't be plugging your reel-to-reel into the next guy's reel-to-reel into the next guy. You just take the RF and put it straight into your recorder now, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny because I was listening to these recordings, and you could hear, you know, like you could hear,
right, the metronome.
Like, yeah, you could hear the metronome going, or you could hear, bum 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 bum, like that, you know, to like, and I'll be like, hey, what's that piano part? Oh, it's a guide track. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, there's a vocal coming up here. So you know, the monitor guy or gal or whatever, the monitor engineer handles that. And then you'll have Dimmerland, what we call Dimmer Beach, which is where all of the electrics that handle the lighting live. And that's anything from actual dimmers from back when we used to use hundreds and hundreds of, you know, can lights with, you know, 1K watt, you know, lamps in them, through, you know, gigantic 3,000 watt moving lights and whatever, you know, whatever else is up there, you know, and a lot of times you'll have, you know, your front of house lighting director will be on headset also with their dimmer tech. So that way, and I've run dimmer tech for a lot of shows. I ran, you know, dimmer tech, and I was part of the crew that saved a show for Eddie Vedder when the front of house console absolutely ate shit in between Act 1 and Act 2 of his solo show. But you know, you could be like, hey, it looks like the furthest stage left moving light on the mid stage truss is acting like a fool. Can you send it a reset or just power cycle it, please? Sure, no problem. All right, and then you look at your schedule of instruments and go, okay, furthest stage left on the mid-stage truss, that's instrument number 207. You go down and look at your power distro, and if you're a smart person, you've labeled everything. All right, that's breaker for instrument 207. Flick it off, wait 10 seconds, flick it on, thing goes, all of a sudden, whoop, it, you know, it spins back into place. Okay, thank you very much, Dimmer Beach. Looks like it's working okay. Or, hey, that thing's not coming back up. Just turn it off and leave it off so it doesn't act like, you know, erratic during the show. And then you'll have Video Village. Video Village is the people that handle the video switching. So, like, you know, if you've got cameras throughout the venue and you've got maybe RoboCams that are up, you know, in trussing or something like that, Video Village people handle the switching of the camera shots and the shading of the shots and, you know, also integrating stuff that's coming out from media servers. So they're switching media content with live content and stuff. There's a lot of people that go into making a show like that, and they're all out of work right now.
Yeah. Well, can we circle back? Because one of the things I want to make sure we have a chance to talk about is this this live performance sort of movement that's happening on social media and stuff now. I noticed that you put up a picture of your studio that was completely illuminated red, and you were, so what is that, and what's the significance of it?
All right. So it is something that the industry did kind of collectively on September 1st. So it's something that already happened, but it's something that is still very, 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 very relevant to all the listeners and viewers of this and everybody in general, because really what it is, it's a call to action and an attempt to raise awareness. And I really do love that even on my own post, you know, like 100, literally more than 100 people were like, you know, either liking it, loving it, or whatever. And I would get people that were like, hey, what is this about? What do you mean, you know, it's 9 p.m. and it's time to light it up red? And I would send them the link to wemakeevents.org. And wemakeevents.org is a Basically, for lack of a better term, it's kind of like a nonprofit organization that is raising awareness of the fact that globally there are 12 million people in the events production industry right now that are out of work. Our industry as a whole has had 97% work stoppage. So you've got 97% of the companies, workers, venues, everything that goes into making a show happen. And it's not just rock shows. It's everything from rock shows to Broadway to regional theater to corporate events to flower shows at convention centers, even to sporting events, to esports. All these things, they all require people to make the show happen. And since March 12th of 2020, the entire industry has been at an exact dead stop. And it's not reasonable to expect any type of an industry to be able to survive on 6 straight months of absolutely fuck all in terms of income. You know, these companies all have bills to pay. They've got mortgages or leases on their spaces. They've made capital investments in millions of dollars worth of equipment.
It's all sitting in warehouses doing nothing right now. It's just collecting dust.
You know, the employees have health care benefits that are being paid for by these employers or their unions. You know, these are not people. I really have to put a human face to this. You know what I mean? These aren't. When you think of the people that are involved in the events industry, you know, you may think, oh, roadies. You know what I mean? These are the dudes that, you know, get drunk every night and, you know, they bang groupies and it's just a big old rolling party all day long. That shit fundamentally has not existed since the 80s.
Yeah.
Yep. We're long beyond that. You know what I mean? We are 40 years beyond the heyday of that nonsense. Now, when you're a member of a touring crew, you have to be vetted to get the job. You have to submit a resume. You have to generally, I mean, even when I got vetted to do the jobs that I did with the artists that I toured with, I mean, I had to have a pretty good list of bona fides. And you know, there's definitely, you know, there's definitely a rock and roll aspect to it. You know, every day you can show up in tight black jeans and a hoodie and whatever, and you know, beanie or something like that. But you know, you have to be professional and you have to understand the technology you're working with.
There's too much liability financially now. Safety liability.
Sure.
The days of just one semi truck with equipment and a band packed in a van and then they use the stadium speakers that's gone. Like nobody does that anymore. Yeah.
And you know, you're dealing with, you know, like you're dealing with hundreds of people that all literally travel together on, you know, between 5 and 15 buses or whatever, you know, 12 to a bus. And, you know, then you've got the tractor trailer drivers, the catering people, the security staff, the wardrobe people that handle the clothes the band wear. You've got the merchandising managers that like lug all the t-shirts into the venue and hopefully sell them all. And they handle the, you know, all the money changing hands, and they settle out with the venue at the end of the night. And then they report those numbers to the tour manager and the tour accountant. And those are all people that travel with this stuff, and they are all out of work. So, you know, the thing is, a lot of people don't realize that this industry exists at all. They don't realize that it's a valid way to make a living at all. And a lot of people just are under this impression that, oh, well, that's not a real job. I'm here to tell you that it is a very fucking real job. It is a very hard job. It is a job not many people can do. It is a job with a high amount of stress that comes with it. It is a job that has an alarmingly high rate of people who have substance abuse problems because of things like when I say substance abuse, I'm just saying like, you know, people have unmanaged depression because they're separated from their families for a fucking year at a time and they live on a bus or like, you know, like something like that. I'm not saying everybody is like partying and doing rails of blow off of, you know, one another's butts or anything like that. It's more of like, you know, when we get home from the tour, then all of a sudden we drink too much, you know what I mean, kind of thing. You know, it's or you get people who have depression, you know what I mean? And the pace of that life is there's no time to stop, you know what I mean? You're on a definite deadline and you've got tens of thousands of tickets sold and we cannot stop because of your bad day.
Right.
You don't get to call out sick. It's not like going to an office job where, I'm not really feeling it today. Let me call in and I'm just going to take the day off of work.
Yeah, and I'll catch up tomorrow kind of thing. That's not possible.
I have literally been told by my stage manager, even when I was just kind of putzing around and trying to help somebody out, but his nickname for me was Lightsaber. He's like, Lightsaber, get the hell off of that truss. If you fall and you break your leg, we don't have another one of you to replace you. You're the only one who knows how to do your job. We don't have the time to train a replacement to run the show every night. You need to stay down here and tell him how to do what you need him to do. We can't have you climbing up there, because I'm a hands-on person. I don't like to just point and tell people what to do.
Right.
If I can jump in and help get somebody out of the weeds, I'm a stagehand at heart. You know what I mean? I have no problem lifting a 300-pound box up a set of stairs to help somebody get their job done faster, because it all helps us get our job done faster. But the point is that these are gigs that, like, there's not a lot of time for hurt feelings, and there's not a lot of time to do things like process the fact that, like, I was on the road when, my significant other at the time, her mom got diagnosed with cancer, you know what I mean? And like, I have to be the asshole who's like, hey, I'd love to talk about this right now, but I literally cannot talk on the phone right now.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
I can't, like, how the fuck do you deal with that?
And that's your life. Yeah, they have to sign on for that to do that job. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it requires, I really probably painted myself as somewhat of an asshole in that situation, but like that's literally what it boiled down to. Like there was no one else who could do my job that day. There's no calling out. I'm getting paid a lot of fucking money, like a lot of money. I managed to, I was splitting time between touring as a lighting person and then also working as just basically a salesperson at a music store. And the music store gave me the opportunity to take, up to 3 months of paid, unpaid leave per year. They weren't going to pay me to not be there, but they would say, hey, if you want to go tour or whatever, by all means go, you'll have a job when you come back, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And I would make more money in the 8 to 10 weeks I would be gone on the road. I would make equivalent in those 8 to 10 weeks my annual salary at the other job.
Right. And if you guys, and to your point, if you guys are doing your job right, the folks that do this behind the scenes stuff, nobody sees you. So
you nailed it.
And so there's that, it's a weird kind of mind fuck, right? Because you don't think, and I this dawned on me when I went and seen Roger Waters in the Us and Them tour here, the last big tour he did. And I got into the venue like an hour and a half or something like that before they even started running the background music to start the intro into the show. And so I walked around a whole lot, and the control area that they were using for that show looked like they were trying to like put a man on the moon. I mean, it was insane what was going on back there in comparison to what was on the stage, which was extremely sparse. And because the stage was if you've seen that tour, I don't want to rehash it, but
actually, Matt, I worked on the wall.
Oh, did you? Okay, so you know what they're up to. I mean, and in that tour, man, the entire show was almost the entire show was over the audience. They had these enormous screens that came down and all this amazing stuff. So I get the control panel, but once that show started, I didn't think twice about all of the people that were flipping the switches and pushing the buttons and making all of this stuff happen in time with this musical production that was going on the stage. So it's a little deceiving how many people are behind the scenes putting keeping all of this stuff together. Yeah.
If you notice us,
something's
one
wrong.
of us is getting fired.
Yeah.
And that's really how it works. That's literally how it fucking works, is if your presence, which is usually conspicuous by its absence or you having erred,
right,
becomes obvious, God forbid the talent has to literally call you out over the microphone, like, hey, lighting guy, blah, 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 blah. Oh, come in for it now.
Oh,
Fuck.
yeah.
Like, I'm gonna hear about this after the show. You don't want that. You do not want that.
You guys are living under like a weird you're living under an immense amount of pressure, as much in some ways as the artists themselves on the stage. Except that you don't get any of the glory for it, right? It's all projected at the artist.
Well,
but that's what you're supposed to do, right? I mean, that's the point of what you do.
And that's an important thing to bring up, is that when you get to a certain level in that business, and this does tie back to what we're talking about the fact that, this is a very real way to make a living. The artist and their crew, you know what I mean? Like the people that work with them, the musicians, they're getting paid on the record sales. They're getting a cut of the merch. They're also getting an astronomical, you would not believe the numbers that are associated with how much they get just paid to do those shows. Like if you just want to amuse yourself and Google what the guarantees, you can actually find this information out there. There's a couple of brokers that actually publish numbers, or at least they'll put up like ballpark numbers. Oh wow, I said the G word, and my phone woke up.
Yes.
You.
What would you like to search, Ian?
Yeah. I was wondering why the hell my phone lit up. I'm like, oh, I said the G word. But you can search for this on the web, and there are a few people that have these things up there where you can see that, like, the performance fee for like whatever, it's like $100,000, to do an hour-long show, and that's like, it's nothing. You know what I mean? When you consider that you can get, however many asses in seats at however many dollars per ticket, whatever. But, the crew, they aren't seeing any of that money. They're not getting, they're not getting a cut of the merch. They're not, but what we are getting paid is a day rate. You know what I mean? And we negotiate that before we start the tour. Or what we're, I always worked directly for the band as a lighting director. I'm a direct employee of the band.
That makes sense. Yep.
But on larger tours where you have, something like Tool, my friend who's the dimmer tech actually works for the company that's contracted to supply the lighting equipment.
Oh, okay. They're like straight to the manufacturer kind of stuff there. Then.
Well, not the manufacturer. But this illustrates different layers of the industry. So I am a manufacturer rep. I am a contracted representative for a lighting console manufacturer. We talked about the laser company that I represent. But then I, as a part of my job, I interface with rental houses and production companies.
Right.
And what they do is they buy hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of this equipment because the band themselves don't want to buy this shit. They don't want to own it. They don't want to maintain it. They don't want to have to store it and warehouse it.
Right.
So every time they do a tour, they just contract a production company. There's a couple of big ones like PRG, which stands for Production Resource Group, or Four Wall, or Bandit Lights, or BML Blackbird, or Morpheus, or Solotech, or something like that. And all those companies, they have fleets of their own tractor trailers with their own drivers. They have fleets of their own technicians that go out and basically are in charge of the care and feeding of this equipment. And they interface with the lighting director, who is an employee of the band.
Okay.
Okay.
So the lighting director is, on the band's payroll because they are the person who understands the band's vision, and they oftentimes they are going to interface with the lighting designer, who was contracted by the band to sit down way ahead of the tour going out on the road and go, all right, this is what our stage design looks like. This is where we're going to be standing. These are the songs we're going to be playing. Can you, using 3D visualization software, can you show us what this is going to look like, blah, blah, blah. And then the lighting designer gets together with a team of programmers. They program the console to make it look like the designer wants. And then sometimes the lighting director and the lighting designer are the same person. And sometimes the programmer is also that same person. But in larger tours, like, for example, like Nine Inch Nails, their tours were designed by a guy named Leroy Bennett, but then they were programmed by another person, and then they were directed by a third person entirely. You know what I mean? So you'd have somebody like Alistair Bramall Watson or Jason Bullock or a dude named Arlo, who's their current lighting director. Like there's a bunch of fingers in that pie. And again, we're peeling off layers of all the different people who have jobs. And this is just for the lighting. You know what I mean?
And who are currently unemployed.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're talking about 12 million people here.
Yeah.
That as a result of, us doing the right thing and saying, look, it's not safe to put thousands of people or even sometimes more than a few hundred people into a room at the same time. All of these companies, from the small local mom and pop places that maybe have 5 employees and they maybe got a couple $1,000s worth of somewhat obsolete lights and stuff, but they still do regular jobs. They get contracted to do high school dances. They get contracted to do weddings. They'll do occasional concerts when a concert will come through like a local college or something like that, all the way on up through the monstrous companies like PRG, Clare Brothers, Bandit, like all the big ones that do like the Roger Waters shows and stuff like that. They are all making exactly no money. Hundreds of employees furloughed, laid off. I mean, just this week, some friends of mine just got laid off. It sucks to see it happen. Yeah. They were furloughed already, but like it turned into a full on, all right, we got to lay you off because we don't see that the work is going to come back anytime soon. It makes me so fucking angry. You know what I mean? That there's people who are just like, I miss rock shows. I miss concerts. It's like, yeah, dude, I miss putting them on. Yeah. As much as you miss spending $40 to go do something you like to do, I miss my fucking job. Yeah. And 12 million people worldwide miss doing their job. This isn't just something that it isn't just a bunch of bands whining that they don't get to go play. And it's like, well, right. Then, hey, go work for a living, you exactly. Lazy musician or whatever. There's a lot on the line here with these. Yeah.
With these.
It's not some Peter Pan fantasy of, granted, there are elements of it that I'm greatly thankful for the tiny little smidgens of Peter Pan rock and roll fantasy. Let me tell you, picked on, unpopular, 16-year-old me loved seeing 37-year-old me roll through my old hometown in a fleet of 5 fucking tour buses on the way to Atlantic City. That felt really fucking good. And I just basically went like this.
Yeah, you're flying the bird.
Actually, I went like this. All my friends who were like, my homies that I still love. This is what made fun of me in high school. Fuck y'all.
Fuck all the shitters.
Big old glass of haterade to y'all. Suck my entire dick and balls.
See ya.
I'm out. Clang.
Yep.
But for every tiny little moment like that, there was the days where, dude, we're out in Iowa and there's a tornado rolling through.
Yeah.
We're like hunkered down and shit's coming in sideways and Blues Travelers fucking Hammond B3 organ is getting rained on. And we're just like, again, there's no calling out sick. Right. What do you do? You know what I mean? At some point, someone's got to we had to make the call to cancel the show. We got, let's say 60% of the night we got through, but then it sky opened up, tornado watch, outdoor show. We got to call it. You know what I mean? We tried to make it happen. We tried to stand by and hold off, but it was like, boo, everything. It's like, sorry guys, everybody please move inside, please find shelter. We apologize, but this is obviously out of our hands here. Thank you for coming to the show. We'll see you next time. But like all 20 or 30 of our dumbasses, we're sitting there in the bus soaking fucking wet because we had to batten everything down as best as we could, lit up the consoles and just put them under a tent, drop the tent, and just try to kind of get stuff up off the ground so it doesn't float away or whatever. But here our dumbasses are in these buses with like hailstones and shit coming down. It sounds like, John Bonham's playing the drum solo on our house.
Yeah.
This is our house that we live in, and we're sitting there going, well, all of the band's equipment is still on that stage right now. All the PA equipment is still on that stage right now.
Mm.
It's 11 p.m. and we need to be in such and so. We need to be in, the middle of Illinois tomorrow at 10 a.m.
Yeah. And you still got your job to do, right? You got to wait until that passes and get everything done and get loaded and set up in the next place on time. Yeah.
Passes? No.
Yeah.
Eventually we had to just go, all right, look, everybody. I mean, this is why I tour with an entire secondary, suitcase with foul weather gear in it and, a $400 Mountain Hardware coat and, a spare set of boots. And you just basically reach down around your ankles, pull your balls up and do your job.
Yeah.
It's, and we had to huck all the stuff off, coil up all the cable, put it into the bins, push it onto the trailers and just get it the fuck out of there. And then finally, thankfully we were at an outdoor space, but it was adjacent to like a sort of like a casino. And the venue manager was like, hey, we've got we're like, hey, do you have any industrial dryers or something like that we could put our clothes in? So we basically sat there. We brought our bus bags in and had like a change of clothes, like, pajamas and whatever like that, like so when you go to sleep on the bus. But like we basically just kind of sat there like bachelors at a fucking laundromat waiting for our shoes and our clothes and shit like that to just tumble dry for an hour. And then when all of our shit was dry, we just basically like put it into plastic bags and just booked it out to the bus in our, basically, again, when you tour, you kind of have to prepare for a whole bunch of things. So, like, you bring a bathing suit. You get a day off at a hotel. Maybe you go swimming. Or, like, you got a buddy that, lives outside, 20 minutes outside of Chicago, and he's got a pool at his house or whatever. So, you bring a bathing suit. So, here we are. Like, me personally, I mean, I don't remember what many other people were wearing, but, like, I'm wearing, like, my Keen waterproof hiking sandals, my Hurley board shorts, and like, a t-shirt, and I've got my backpack with my, my whatever, my bus bag. It's got like my shampoo and shit in it, and a plastic bag with my clothes in it that just come out of the dryer. And we got in the buses and we were like, see ya.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's it, man. There's literally no crying in baseball. You just got to do that shit. And like, I could talk about that all day long, about the stuff that makes that job really fucking hard. And so it's not just a matter of, go get another job, go work for Amazon and huck boxes and stuff like that. It's a very specific, it's a very particular set of skills.
Yeah.
To quote Liam Neeson, like, and then the next day we show up in, it was either Illinois or Missouri or something like that. And the first 3 hours of load in were us taking all those road cases. And thankfully it was sunny for the first half of the day. But, taking all those road cases and turning them upside down on the pavement and taking every inch of cable that we had and everything that wasn't actively being used on stage was laid out on pavement to just sit there and bake in the sun and try to cool off. And, like the stage, all the cable that we had to put up on the stage that day was wet.
Right.
It sucked. But I mean, literally, there's nothing else to do besides just get your damn job done. And so it's really important to kind of illustrate that.
Yeah, the internet's not going to save this industry that way. Like, right. I was even naive a little bit at first because I was like, oh, this shit's all just going to go virtual and da-da-da-da. No, man, what about all those people that are that are supported by this industry? They can't do their job on the internet. There's no way for you that's all just gone until this changes.
Yeah, it's really hard. And so, there have been some points at which, the industry can sort of pivot, but they're few and far between. I was talking, with people today about the fact that, like, you've got some companies that are able to, the downside and the strength of the industry is that many jobs are hyper specialized.
Yeah.
You've got video people just do video. and lighting people just do lighting, and audio people just do audio. And there are companies that just do those things. And on a tour, you will have, this is the vendor for the audio. This is the vendor for the lighting. This is the vendor for the staging. This is the vendor for the trucking. This is the vendor for the logistics, for the shipment and stuff like that. This is the vendor for the cloth and soft goods, like for like merchandise. This is the vendor for the video. This is the vendor for the camera crew, like all these different things. This is the vendor for catering. And so you're going to have like 12 companies subcontracted to this touring business entity of, Taylor Swift Tour 2020. You know what I mean? Like, that exists just as this company for this specific tour that has its own payroll account and its own W-2s that are going out and whatever. But, it's hard for individualized companies like that to try to
pivot. Yeah.
Because, if you're small and you're like a hometown hero kind of company, all right, maybe we do sound and lighting and video. And so, all right, lighting right now or sound is sucking, but we've got this video gear and we can kind of like build our warehouse into a small performance space using our trussing and our lights and stuff like that. And we can maybe book it out for, a couple of weeks to have bands come in here and do rehearsals and film it. And so that way they can do their, they can do their webcast or whatever. Or my buddy Chase is a tech with the band Rufus Du Sol, and they did back in, I think it was May, they released a video that they shot out in Joshua Tree. It's an outdoor performance where they had, PRG in LA truck out hundreds of these things called Staer tubes, and there are these wireless DMX controllable LED tubes that you can mount to a mic stand, like a little tripod. And there's like, they shot it using drones, and there's this amazing long shots of the band on this little section of stage decking that's on like the peak of a hill, and they're surrounded all around. They started the cameras rolling right around dusk, and the concert goes through sundown and into nighttime, and there's just these Staer tubes all the fuck around them. I mean, scattered hundreds of feet away. So it's this big, huge, massive scale that you couldn't even do in an arena. It reminds me of like what Coldplay did on one of their tours, where they gave everybody like a wristband with an R fade in it. And at one specific moment in the show, all the lights go black and someone hits the big red button on the R fades, and every fucking wristband in the arena lights up.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, no one knows this is coming. And all of a sudden, all you see is the arena goes black for a beat. And everybody's like, what the hell just happened? And all of a sudden, boom, everybody's wristband lights up. And you're like, holy shit, this is so fucking cool.
Yeah.
It's a field full of fireflies. And like, the audience becomes the illumination for that moment. It was just magical. But like, another performer called Iona Lee, who also does a performance with the name, it's all run together, but it's I am I, who am I? It's I am I, who am I? And they performed on like this island in Sweden where it's just, two people, and then they had like guest musical people like who jumped in. Imogen Heap jumped in over like a web feed. The singer for the band Trust jumped in over the web feed. Someone else significant, and I'm totally spacing on their name, and I'm going to remember after this. But it was another thing where they were playing outdoors, and they rented all this equipment that got trucked out there. But like, it's not nearly the same thing as doing that every fucking night for a year.
Right. Yeah.
Right. It's a one-off. It's only happening once, and then this filmed performance, is only gonna. It's only really gonna monetize once.
One time. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're going to use it over and over again. But the monetization only happens during the filming, and then that's it. It's over. Right.
Exactly. So it's not a sustainable line of work for someone to make a living at. The steadiness of that just isn't there.
So what?
So
to kind of to use your term, to land the plane, right? Sort of bring this thing home. Where does the industry then? Where is this going? Obviously, it's not going anywhere until there's either some sort of vaccination or a rapid test that you can get results from within seconds, right? Because you're not going to fill venues until you can either vaccinate everybody or test everyone as they're walking in the door. That's the only two things that's going to fix this, right? So
what we have going on right now is the Lighted Up Red, which is called Red Alert Restart, hashtag Red Alert Restart, hashtag We Make Events, hashtag Extend PUA, are an attempt to get the United States Congress to do their fucking job and look out for the interests of 12 million. I keep stressing this word because you can't really put. I had this conversation with a few people about like being able to understand what 12 million looks like, or what a billion of something looks like.
Yeah.
Do your own research on that and visualize 12 million of something, and now picture 12 million people that are all out of work. But we're trying to get Congress to extend the PUA, which is a way to extend and expand unemployment, emergency unemployment coverage for people who are specifically in this particular industry. We are unable to do our jobs. We are morally unable to do our jobs. There are 12 million of us. This isn't just dudes, with long hair, pushing boxes, smoking cigarettes, and boning groupies. These are professionals. These are people who have been doing their job for a very long time. This is highly skilled work. And I have to go off on my spiel here and land the plane, but you need to understand what's at stake here. Like I said, the guarantees associated with a band's performance fee just for one night, hundreds of $1,000s. When I would tour, just as a lighting guy, after that was all over, when it came time for, April 15th to roll around, I would have to hand my tax accountant a stack of 30 to 40 W-2s, because I would get W-2s from every state that the tour would pass through.
God, I forgot. I didn't even think about that. Shit.
Every state wants a piece of that because we literally increase the GDP of that town nightly.
Yeah. Yep.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars of revenue, taxable revenue, pass through that arena, stadium, right, theater, whatever, wherever the hell we are that night. It's just like a professional sports team that's playing, and each of those players is getting paid $17 million divided by how many games a year they play. Those players also get, when the Milwaukee Bucks go into Miami, they're paying taxes to Florida on that income that they earn that night. And it happens, it's complicated because you need to realize that's the fucking amount of money that is involved with this. It isn't just chump change. It isn't like, oh yeah, I'm going to go earn $50 lifting cases into a back of a truck here.
Right.
This is people making incomes of hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. As a lighting director, I don't want to, point it, but roughly, if you took my weekly rate as a lighting director for a down the scale, not AAA artist, I'm not the lighting director for Pink or BTS or Roger Waters or anything like that. But I'm touring with bands you've heard of, and I'm making, let's say, $2,000 to $2,500 a week. I feel comfortable talking about that because it breaks down to, we're playing 4 or 5 shows a day. 4 or 5 shows a day, 4 or 5 shows a week.
Right.
It breaks down to around $500 a day. And if you break that down to an 18-hour workday,
you're getting paid shit. Yeah, per hour.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Plus all the amount of work I have to do just on the bus, calling, making phone calls, doing all the drafting, for months ahead of time, designing and it's those are all expenses that have to get recouped. But and if you take that weekly rate and you multiply that by 52, I'm making over $100,000 a year as a lighting guy.
Right.
Now, like I said, I'm only on the road 9-10 weeks out of the year. So maybe I'm only making $25,000 out of a tour, but that's still, I'm going back to my quote unquote day job. And that helps me keep having that day job for the other 40 weeks out of the year. And that day job gives me health insurance because the United States sucks at taking care of its citizens as far as giving us access to health care and stuff. So I have to work a drudgery job with a really bad health care plan just to stay compliant with the tax law. I'm not going to lift the lid off that fucking can of worms, but the individual mandate sucked. That was something that I really disagreed with, because it's like, why do I have to go work a job I hate just because you mandate me to have health insurance? Right now, I don't need it. Give it to someone who needs it. You know what I mean? Like, to the people who need health care, give it to them for free. I'll gladly pay into it, but don't make me have to pay a private company for health insurance that I don't need. I'm giving them hundreds of dollars out of every one of my paychecks that I never went to a fucking doctor, because again, I live in a job where I can't take a sick day. All I need is just give me a script for some fucking antibiotics. I'll be fine. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'll take some Advil and suck it up. You know, like, now that I'm moving on in life, I'm in a job where I'm not touring and I have access to better healthcare. But don't make me have to spend that money. I'm sorry that I veered into that, but the point is that these are jobs that account for a very large amount of revenue passing through your city, everybody's city. If you're listening to this right now, we are adding to the money that gets taken out of our paychecks and put into taxes to fund your roads, to fund your schools, to fund your public works and things like that, to pay for your civil servants. Those are all taxes I paid. All right. I have to literally go through and have my accountant do 30 separate state tax returns.
Oh, jeez.
And I'm paying state income tax on all of those. And I'm contributing, and everybody on the tour that gets paid like this, we're all doing it. So these are all things that individually contribute to the economy of every state in the union. It's mind-blowing what a massive effect and interrelated ecosystem this whole thing is. Right. And so it's really important to note that this isn't just people crying about not, like you said, like, you know, oh, my Peter Pan day job of, you know, touring with a rock and roll band or whatever. That's not what this is. This is a lot bigger than that. And so it's a lot more important than just, oh, well, you know, you got laid off, tough shit. You know, life sucks for everybody. We don't have any alternatives. Like, this is what we do for a living. This is like, you know, if you watch TV, if you watch movies, if you watch, you know, televised sporting events, if you own a CD and listen to music, we're the people that make that shit possible. You know what I mean? These 12 million people worldwide are the people that enable you to be able to sit on your couch and enjoy the shit that makes you happy. We love doing it for you. We love doing that. We all will rally under the collective joy of being part of that experience for someone who is experiencing theater, experiencing a movie. You know, that's why we work those fucking crazy jobs where we're outside in a tornado getting pelted with hail and water and stuff like that, because that's what we signed up to do. We chose to do that. Just like someone who, like, you know, signs up to be a firefighter or something like that. Not that I'm trying to equivocate those two jobs, but it's similar in that you know what the hell it is that you signed up to do, and you're doing it because you believe in it.
And this ain't a buggy whip argument. It isn't like you've been obsoleted.
Right.
That's not the case at all. You know, it wasn't like there was a technology that came along and displaced you out of the job market or out of the pool. That's not what happened. It's like a bomb went off and then everything just stopped. Yeah.
Yeah. So what we're asking is for Congress to do their damn jobs and, you know, pass legislation that extends unemployment and expands unemployment to, I mean, we already had a bunch of good traction with expanding it to include gig workers, like 1099, contractors, which a lot of, I talked very briefly about, having to pay state tax as a W-2 employee of a tour. But you need to also take into account all the union people, and the union people, they work for a labor union, and the labor union is just basically like a staffing agency. They'll say, all right, such and such bank, stadium, all right, we are bringing in U2 tonight. We need 200 workers, blah, 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 bring them in, we'll pay them. And that's, you're working for that company that night. And so then again, at the end of the year, you end up with a stack of 1099s from all these different individual people that you're working for. You're not working for just one employer. You're working for 100 different employers.
Yeah.
And so typically, if you're a 1099, that means you're an independent contractor. That means that you have to handle getting your own health insurance. You're not eligible for unemployment. You're not eligible for all these things that typical people who work normal day-to-day jobs, whether you're working at a car wash or you're working at a car dealership or you're working at a bank or you work at a grocery store as a checkout clerk, whatever like that, you don't have to think about that shit. But when you're getting paid by 100 different employers a year and you're on the hook for paying your own health insurance and you don't qualify for unemployment, usually you're on your own as far as finding the work so that way you don't end up unemployed. But right now, there is no work. No one is hiring at all. It's at a dead stop. There is zero work being done. So we managed to have the CARES Act passed, which expanded the role of unemployment. And I'm sorry to get so into like the nuts and bolts of democracy here, but it's important to understand this stuff. So the CARES Act expanded the role to include gig workers and 1099 workers in the temporary extension and expansion of state unemployment insurance. So the states were allowed to give an additional $600 of unemployment benefits per week to qualifying workers, and the qualifications got expanded to include people like 1099. And there was, of course, the federal stimulus package, which was distributed to everybody out of funds taken from income taxes and whatnot. But that's over. It ended.
Right.
It ended at the beginning of September. So now we're like, all right, now what? And we asked Congress to extend that additional $600 per week funding that went to the states in order for them to have their own state unemployment be expanded and extended. But right now, there's no government funding to literally fund it. And Congress went into recess before they could get anything done.
Yeah, they all went home.
Yep.
Yeah.
They went home, or they went to their fucking beach houses, or wherever the hell it is that our elected representatives go. While meanwhile, hundreds of my friends are jammed up, going to lose their houses, foreclosing, not getting forbearance on their loans. And they aren't bums. These aren't people who extended themselves beyond their means. They had jobs. They had jobs where they worked. Most of my friends that are stagehands, they work fucking 80 hours a week, man. They're working. They're getting, like, a lot of times, even when I was working actively as a stagehand, I'd get a call from the hall saying, "Hey, man, we got work tomorrow. You're going to be at the Wells Fargo Center down in downtown Philly. You're on the load-in for WWE. You're going to be there for a 4-hour call, and then we need 18 people to go do the loadout at the convention center, which is going to happen at 5 p.m.
Right.
And then at 10 p.m. go down to the river and go to Festival Pier. We need people to load out that show down there, or whatever, or." You go do a load in, and then you get a show call, for a theater or something like that to go run a spotlight. So you're literally like, you're 4 hours at this place, go grab a bite to eat, get a hot dog at a cart or something like that, then go drive to this other place. And you're working like 80 hours a week.
Yeah. I've seen some of your posts from before this era, and that's what it was like. It was like, a long traveling, a stop for some sort of a beverage or food, more traveling, a commentary about some music you were listening to, more traveling, a stop, and then like you'd be home like in 3 days or something,
Yeah.
I saw something today, Ian, that I think really puts this into sort of focus, or put it all into focus for me. And that was that the national debt is the highest it's been since World War II.
Yeah.
So it's literally like the entire nation is at war, in a world war worth of debt. That's how impactful it's been. Except there's nobody shooting. Well, people are shooting each other, but you know what I mean? There's no army that's invading per se or anything like that. So it's having that level of an impact. And
well, our defense spending is through the fucking roof. I mean, if you look at the figures on what we spend as a country for defense spending,
it's pornographic. Yeah,
we are this. You know what I mean? This is our bar.
Yeah,
and that collective number is like larger than these guys who are next. These guys who are the next down. So like number 2 is here, number 3 is here, number 4, blah, blah, blah. And like we are all like number 4, number 3, number 2, all the way down. Like you stack them all together, and they barely come to touch what we spend a year.
The United States spends
defense.
more. The United States spends more on defense than the next 10 spending countries combined. Now, who are we fucking going to go to war with?
Who do we need to defend against?
Like we're prepared to go to war, literally go to war with everyone. Like it's that level of spending. I know what you mean. It's insane. It's an insane amount of money. We have a jet fighter, the F-35, that's over. It's going to be over $1 trillion by the time the project's done, and it can't shoot straight. And people wanting to get some financial relief, like you're a pariah or you're a bastard for asking for it. It's like,
yeah, I'm a bum.
Something's wrong here, man. Hey, we're starting to coast in here on 2.5 hours.
Okay.
And my bladder's starting to feel about 2.5. I don't know about yours and your Pez there tonight. But anyway, it's 2 hours, 21 minutes. So was there anything else we want to make sure we cover tonight before we kind of start wrapping up on this, buddy?
I'm going to land the plane on the whole thing and just say that, for anybody who's listening to this, please, if you enjoy music, if you enjoy filmed entertainment, if you enjoy sports, if you like going to shows, if you like going to raves, if you like, going to see theater, any of that stuff, even if you just like watching cartoons or whatever, like, please, I know it sounds really daunting, and I know I just started doing this myself as a result of this. We have the fortunate situation to live in a country where we are allowed to contact our elected representatives and petition them for a redress of our grievances.
Yep.
I have become that guy who's emailing my fucking Congress people, you know what I mean, and my senator, even though, some of those interactions have been very positive and have had great, response. And some have just indicated to me that what my preconceived notion of my representative's level of involvement is about as lackadaisical as I thought it was. You know what I mean? And they kind of fall along party lines, ironically. You know what I mean? It's like, wow, you don't even know what my voting affiliation is. And here I am saying, hey, dear Senator Pat Toomey, can you please, when you go into, the session, can you please look out for the workers of the state of Pennsylvania and make sure that we're, adequately taken care of, because we were the first business to stop doing business and we will be the last business to resume doing business.
That's right. Yeah.
And in the state of Pennsylvania alone, we've got over 500,000 workers. It's something like 520,000 employees that don't have jobs. And so
it's like all of GM shut down. If that happened, people would be losing their shit, but it's the equivalent. It really is.
So, I'm just encouraging people that if you hear anything whatsoever in these stories that I'm telling about my experiences working to make shows as a musician and as a person behind the scenes putting the shows on. If any of that entertains you in any way, and if you can find anything that's relatable in that story, you know, like talking about, you know, and that tornado thing, that was not an isolated incident. That used to happen. We used to tour during the summer, and that would happen 3 or 4 times every tour. But we were happy to do it. That's what we signed on for. We love doing it. And I don't think there's a single person who's in the business that isn't hearing that story and going, yeah, man, I sure have had a couple of those lowdowns. You know? Like, you know, but that's the thing, man. We do that because we love it. And if you find anything relatable in that, for the sake of just society in general, please, it doesn't take much more. If you go to wemakeevents.org, the entire organization, this entire, you know, nonprofit has made it dummy easy to participate in the democratic process of petitioning your elected representatives for a redress of grievances. It's a fucking form. You put your first name, last name, where you're from, maybe a brief message if you want to, or you can copy pasta the message that we've got there, which is just urging the members of Congress to get these emergency measures passed to protect these workers. And I understand that there are plenty of other people who have their asses out in the collective wind. And I hope they're advocating for themselves as well. But all I can do right now as a member of this group of 12 million people is just take a moment to use a platform like you guys are providing me. And, you know, rather than talk about burning shit down and other things that I would like to do right now, I'd rather talk about, you know, how we can try to make a difference and help and try to get some people who are really jammed up right now out of a pretty bad mess. You know, just as if, you know, when Katrina came through and nuked New Orleans, and when Hurricane Sandy wrecked my hometown in New Jersey, you know, there was an outpouring of support from everybody who wasn't affected by it because they had some sense of empathy. They could look at the pictures of my boardwalk that I grew up walking on, you know, with the entire roller coaster in the ocean, you know what I mean? Where just businesses decimated, burned down, gone, entire people's livelihood just gone. And we're not just talking about one town in New Jersey here. We're talking about an entire industry that spans the globe.
Yep.
So please, if you find anything relatable in this, go to the website, put your name in, copy pasta some stuff, and just try to get the legislators who have the ability to make a difference in these people's lives to fucking do something about it. That's my soapbox. I'm done standing on it and shouting, but thank you for the opportunity to talk about that.
Anytime.
Yeah, man. We're glad to be able to be that for you, man, and for this message. Yeah. We really believe in it, too. The show is very much a friend of artists, performers, and entertainers. That's been a foundational pillar since day one. And we feel it, man. We see it, too. Both Eric and I are musicians at heart. And anything we can do to sort of, because I don't want this to go away. I don't want it to take 20 years for this industry to recover. You know, I want that might be selfish, but
yeah, we touched on it last time. You know that like you know there's like a lot of people have kind of a timeline in mind, and I was talking about this with my buddy down at X today. You know that I think a lot of people in our generation aren't, you know, you said you were talking about World War II and being at war right now. Right now, we're basically on a war footing. You know, when World War II happened, a lot of industries just had to kind of stop. You know what I mean? And you know, we went to steel pennies because the copper was needed for the war effort. You know what I mean? And you know, there was no more. You know, whatever. There was no more this because we needed the food for, you know, the people fighting the war or whatever. And our generation and a lot of the majority of people alive today have forgotten what it's like to no longer be in a situation where you can get instant gratification on something.
Right.
We're so used to working on short delivery, Amazon Prime timelines where anything you want can be at your house in 48 hours. And everybody that lives under those give me convenience or convenience, or, you know, give me convenience or give me death, you know what I mean, kind of circumstances, I don't think they understand what looking at something on a 5-year timeline looks like.
Agreed.
And that's really where you got to kind of park yourself and just be like, there's plans. There's Live Events Coalition, which is another organization. It's kind of like a standards body that's made up of a lot of people in the industry, representatives from a lot of those companies that I talked about earlier, like Claire Global and Live Nation, and a lot of the people that do the heavy lifting, so to speak, of the events industry, are all sort of collectively getting their heads together and figuring out what the roadmap looks like for reopening events, doing things like having temperature scanning cameras, limiting the amount of seats sold, what we call killing seats, where like entire sections of seats there will not be tickets available to be sold for those seats. There's a great amount of thought being put into that. And I mean, there are living documents right now that are on a couple of Google Drives that they're out there. Where you can kind of look and see what those plans look like right now, and they're very proactive. They're very customer oriented. They're very into keeping people's safety paramount. No one wants to have a good time at the expense of someone's health. No one of any amount of repute would want to be the person who got to gratiate their ego by playing a show and then getting 20,000 people sick.
Yep.
We don't want that. I personally, me and my partner, we carry a $2 million liability policy. And like, even if we go into a hotel to go do an animation convention or a horror convention, Marriott or Hyatt won't let us in the building and let us open a truck unless they've got a certificate of insurance with them named as additional insured. This industry does not fuck around with liability. We're suspending thousands of pounds of equipment over people's heads. Again, variant laser operator, you know what I mean? Like, you have to, we're working with pyro, we're working with crushing sound pressure levels and stuff like that. And we're doing it at an incredible pace. It gets in and out, in the space of a day. And it's always got to be safety first. And so the people who are thinking safety first are the people who are trying to develop these standards and best practices. But I don't think it'll be 20 years. I think.
No, my point was that if we don't do something about this, the repercussions, I hope it doesn't take 5, to be honest with you. I want to see it come back vibrant and alive. But even if we got the miracle tomorrow, there's going to be a trickle-down effect of this ramping back, because you can't just take a big machine like this and slam the brakes on and then go, okay, everything's okay, and it takes back off at full speed again. It's not going to work that way. It's going to take some time. Plus,
well, if you want to use that analogy, our truck was full of glass, and we slammed the brakes.
Yeah.
Right now, we got to figure out how many glasses are still in one piece.
Exactly. Yeah.
Got companies that I know, friends of mine, that like lost their jobs. Companies have lost their businesses. They've lost, their landlords are like, "Fuck you, pay me." And when you can't pay them, they're like, "Sorry, like you as a friend, but you're also a tenant. Got to go."
And there will be people. There's talent that's going to move and go into other industries necessarily, and then that's going to have to be backfilled later, or that you're going to have to try to get that person to come back, and there's going to be a distrust level with, I ain't fucking doing this job anymore, because God knows when the next flu type thing or corona type thing comes along and the whole thing comes to a screeching halt again. It's tough.
These things are somewhat cyclical, you know what I mean?
They
like
sure
if you look
are.
at plagues, every 100 years or so. You know what I mean? Some massive destabilizing event rolls through, Black Plague, shit like that. The flu of the early, I think it was like 1919 or something like that. There was this is not, it's not necessarily unprecedented. We've just got a very connected society right now. You know what I mean? Where, you don't have the geographic isolation that you used to when people had to travel intercontinentally via steamboats and shit like that.
Yep.
Now you've got instantaneous transmission, people flying across countries, blah, 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 like you're fucked. You know what I mean? Like everybody's so interconnected that the vectors for transmission are just so much faster.
You're right.
But, you kind of nailed it, where like, everything hit the brakes, and we smashed a lot of glass, and we have to be able to figure out what's left and how to get the truck going again.
Right.
And it's going to take time, but it seems like other countries were able to figure this out, and we just are too fucking obstinate.
Yeah.
Have our heads too far up our own asses.
Yeah. Bad leadership too.
Really understand.
It's a clusterfuck. To use an old famous, one of my favorite Navy terms, situation normal, all fucked up, snafu, man. And
absolutely.
It's a truckload of coat hangers. It's going to take time to sort this all out and figure it all
soup
out.
Sandwich. Did you ever use soup sandwich?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Ian, thank you so much. Is there anything else we need to cover, bud, before we wrap up here?
No, I mean, I think last time I kind of really went pretty hard on the promoting the music stuff.
Yep.
I do have some music out, ianstaer.bandcamp.com. I'm sure you could throw a link up to that,
yep.
staer.bandcamp.com. Some friends of mine have some records out. Stephen Alexander Ryan and Justin McGrath. That's SARANDJM. So SARandJM.bandcamp.com. They just did that sprawling soundtrack for the graphic novel High Level on DC Comics. Friends of mine, my mastering engineer Eric Oler and his partner Matt Finale out in Madison, Wisconsin. They have a band called Clack, KLACK, and they've got a new record coming out this Friday on Bandcamp Friday. So hit clack.bandcamp.com, throw them some money and some love. And that's pretty much it.
And we didn't kill the battery this time.
No, and all the batteries, my lights and stuff, they stayed going this time. So we've got nice actual ambient lighting in here, and you're not going to have to gain it up.
Awesome stuff. Well, thank you so much, sir. I'm sure we'll be doing this again. You know what? We book this when we get through this shit. We're going to talk about it again on the other end. Let's do that too, okay?
That sounds great. I'm looking forward to it.
How it's coming back.
Or next album, whichever comes first.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
That's going to happen. You know what I mean? I just need to kind of get my crap together and
yeah.
Find your mojo, find your motivation.
Yeah. Finding my motivation is really it.
All right, thanks for listening.
What's my motivation here, really? What is my character?
Survival.
A method. Very good. All right, thanks for listening, everybody. Check us out at www.noshitcast.com. It's KNOWSHITCAST.com. Make sure you hit those like and subscribe buttons. Give us a share. We'd greatly appreciate it. Leave us a comment. We might get back to you or talk about it on the air. And we'll get I lost my train of thought. And we'll catch you all next time. Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye, Sigils. That was excellent, dude. Yeah, I think we thought